I declare open this public hearing of Senate Environment and Communications Legislation Committee. These are supplementary budget estimates proceedings, and the agencies heard during these estimates are those which have been nominated by various senators. The Senate has referred to the committee of the particulars of proposed expenditure for 2014-15 for the portfolio of communications and other related documents. Today the committee is examining the communication portfolio. The committee has set the 9th of January 2015 as the date by which answers to questions on notice are to be returned. Under Standing Order 26, the committee must take all evidence in public session. This includes answers to questions on notice. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence to a committee. The Senate, by resolution in 1999, endorsed the following test of relevance of questions at estimates hearings. Any questions going to the operations of financial positions of the departments and agencies which are seeking funds in the estimates are relevant questions for the purposes of estimates hearings. I remind officers that the Senate has resolved that there are no areas in connection with the expenditure of public funds where any person has a direct discretion to withhold details or explanations from the Parliament or its committees unless the Parliament has expressly provided otherwise. The Senate has resolved also that an officer of a department of the Commonwealth shall not be asked to give opinion on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to the Minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about how and when policies were adopted. I particularly draw the attention of witnesses to an order of the Senate of the 13th of May 2009 specifying the process by which a claim of public interest immunity should be raised. Witnesses are specifically reminded that a statement that information or a document is confidential or consists of advice to government is not a statement that meets the requirements of the 2009 order. Instead, witnesses are required to provide some specific indication of the harm to public interest that could result from the disclosure of information or the document. An officer called to answer a question for the first time should state their full name and the capacity in which they appear. Mobile phones should be switched off or to silent. The committee has agreed to rearrange the order of today's hearing. The revised program will be available on the committee website shortly, and copies, I assume, will be available here. I welcome the Honourable Mitch Fifield, Assistant Minister for Social Services, representing the Minister for Communications, and portfolio officers. Now, Mr Clark, would you like to make an opening statement?
Drew Clark, Secretary, Department of Communications. No opening statement. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Now, Senator Urquhart, Senator Canavan's just got to leave in a second. He's just got a couple of quick questions. Would you? Okay. So,
I would agree, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Mr Clark, you'd be aware that the government is aiming to reduce the regulatory burden on businesses, and my understanding is most ministers have written to departments outlining their expectations for reductions of regulation. Can you outline what actions you're taking in the Department of Communications to reduce the regulatory burden?
Thank you, Senator. I'll ask my Deputy Secretary, Ms O'Loughlin, to respond to your question.
Nerita O'Loughlin, Deputy Secretary, Department of Communications. Senator, the communications portfolio has been working very hard over the last 12 months to deliver against the government's deregulation agenda. We have successfully brought forward around about $70 to $80 million worth of regulatory savings through the reduction of red tape burden, without, of course, compromising consumer safeguards. A lot of that has been a mixture of both in the telecommunications space, a lot of redundant reporting, which has imposed a significant cost on business over time, so we've stripped out a lot of that. In the broadcasting area, we've also, in the current bill before the Parliament, taken out all the legislation that was associated with the planning for digital television, which of course has been completed now. So we've been working very closely with the industry about what are their needs, what are their priorities for removing red tape, and I think we've delivered very well over the last 12 months. We're now starting our planning for next year. Earlier this year, the Minister released a deregulation roadmap identifying to the industry the process that we'd go through for the year, and I expect that we'll announce a new roadmap early next year to guide industry for next year's program.
I think the Productivity Commission is developing a performance framework against which regulatory agencies will be benchmarked, if that's the right word. Are you aware of that work?
Yes, the Productivity Commission did a very large study on regulatory performance, and the Office of Best Practice Regulation has recently put out a policy around how regulators' performance will be assessed, and that has a variety of ways that regulatory performance can be assessed. It can be by an annual self-assessment where regulators must talk to their stakeholders, look at their performance and delivery against the policy objectives of legislation and annually report, or it can be an independent review done by a panel which would look at the regulator's performance either annually or over each 3 years. So that the commencement date for that framework is June next year. Right. So we'll be looking at what's the best way of taking that policy framework through with our regulator.
Thanks. And look, I've just got some questions about digital TV reception in regional areas. Is that best here, or is there some other? I wasn't quite sure.
Depending on how specific they are, Ms O'Loughlin does have some depth in that area, but we might...
It's specific to reception in Mackay, although I know of issues in Toowoomba as well.
Perhaps if I'm happy to take the question, but I could also take it offline and do some work back at the office and come back with an answer for you later today.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is there any other? I just wasn't sure on the agenda. Is there another area that those questions should be asked, or should they be asked here?
Yes, the subject to the change schedule, there is a large block of time for the department's programs, and the relevant officers will be here then. I think, Chair, that's scheduled for this evening's session.
I can do it then. Thank you, Chair.
Unless you wish to give Ms O'Loughlin the questions, and then the departmental officials, when they come back, will be in a position to answer.
Specifically, Ms O'Loughlin, it's to do with them. There is detail in an article in the Daily Mercury on the 17th of January this year. I can table that article too, if you like. And I'll ask them in program 1.1. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Urquhart.
Thanks very much. Morning, Mr Clark. I'd like to talk about the department's oversight of GBEs. Are you aware that Mr Justin Milne, one of the minister's picks for the NBN Co board, used to work with Mr Turnbull at Aussie Mail?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And in April 2013, he came out publicly supporting the coalition policy. You're aware of that?
I can't recall the specifics, but I can't recall the specifics of that, Senator, but I'm not disputing your suggestion.
Okay, but you'd have to be aware that he did support the coalition policy, irrespective of the date.
Well, I don't know specifically, Senator. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be disingenuous. I just can't recall a specific moment on that.
Okay, so Mr Milne was flagged as one of Mr Turnbull's NBN co-appointments as early as June 2013. Are you aware of that?
Well, from my perspective, Senator, any so-called flagging is mere speculation. The government made the announcements to the board after the election when they were the government and had the authority to do so. Prior to that, it would be mere speculation. Yeah,
but whether it's speculation or not, it was flagged that he was one of Mr Turnbull's appointments or preferred appointments to NBN Co. So you'd have to be aware.
Senator, what do you mean by flagged?
Well, raised.
Where and by whom? In what forum?
Well,
in what media?
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's often speculation about impending appointments in newspapers.
Yeah.
This is when you were in opposition.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm saying that there's often speculation in newspapers.
Okay. All right, so did the department award a contract to a company called Milne Proprietary Limited last year?
Could you say the name again?
Milne, CICOMILNE Proprietary Limited.
Are you able to give... I can't...
The hint is Milne at the end. The rest is irrelevant.
Thank you, Senator. I'm not aware of that
It's in the answer to a question notice you provided.
Now,
thank you.
Senator Conroy, are you intending to ask questions, or are you going to let Senator Urquhart?
I'm assisting the witness.
So, Senator, I don't. If we have previously provided that advice, then I'm sure that's correct. But I don't have it. I don't have details in front of me.
In the May,
Senator, is there a particular answer to a question on notice that you're referring to? And if so, do you have the number?
there is. It's question 603 in
Very
May.
well prepared.
Question 603 in May. There was a question taken on notice.
And it says, and the individual consultant engaged was Justin Milne.
Okay. So I take it that you did provide a contract to that company, given the answer and the response to the question on notice?
So, Senator, I have in front of me a copy of our answer to question number 603, yes?
Yep. So the answer is yes?
The answer...
Could you read out the answer to assist everybody?
Chair, is that... So Senator Urquhart asked, on the list of contracts notified since the election by the department on the tenders.gov.au website, there is a contract for consultancy services from a company called Milne, don't know how that would be pronounced, of $14,000 between September and December. What were those consultancy services and who was the individual consultant engaged? And the answer that we have provided is, quote, the contract with Milne of $14,000 between September and December was for the provision of advice on NBN transition issues, and the individual consultant engaged was Justin Milne.
Okay, so I take it from that then the answer is yes to the question, did the department award the contract to that company?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So are you aware of who is 100% shareholder of that company?
Do I have that unequivocal knowledge? No. But
Are you aware of who the individual consultant engaged by the company with Mr Milne's name is?
I have no more information than the answer that we've given in response to question number 603, Senator, in regard to the structure of the company.
What did you hire the Minister's best mate to do on departmental money? What did he actually do?
Provided advice on NBN transition issues, Senator.
And did he have any experience in NBN issues prior to you employing him on transition issues?
My recollection of Mr Milne's CV is that he has a wide range of relevant experience, Senator.
So he'd been previously employed by NBN Co? The answer is no. Here's a hint. So what was his previous experience in NBN Co transition issues?
Senator, I don't have his CV in front of me. I'm happy to take that question on notice.
You just told us that he had a wide, according to your recollection of his CV. So 1 minute you can remember his CV, and the next minute your memory's faulty on his CV.
No, I think that's an unfair proposition, Senator. I recall the engagement of Mr Milne, and I recall, since I am ultimately responsible, as you are saying, Senator, for the expenditure of public funds, being satisfied that he had relevant experience for the task.
And who suggested his name to you?
Senator, I can't go back to... I can't recall the
Well, do you want to
process.
take on notice?
I'm happy
Did
to
you
take
think
that
of
on
him?
notice. I don't
Did
believe
Mr.
I'd
Robinson
met Mr.
think
I
of
don't
him?
believe that I personally had met Mr Milne at that point, Senator.
Did Mr Robinson suggest his name to you?
I can't recall, Senator.
Senator Conroy, do you think you could move on? The witness has given you an answer he doesn't recall, so let's move on.
And I'm now asking if other officers recall
He doesn't
or give
recall.
it to Mr... So, are you trying to answer his question for him or telling me how to ask my question?
No, I think that badgering the witness is a very bad look this early in the day.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion and I'm entitled to
Well,
ask
I'm the chair and
my
I'm very
question.
entitled to my opinion, so I think
And
maybe
I'm
move
entitled
on.
to ask my question. So did Mr Robinson or anyone else in your department suggest Mr Milne be employed on a contract to help with NBN transition issues?
Senator, I'll take on notice the question as to the process by which Mr Milne came to our attention as a suitable advisor.
And not just in terms of if no one in the department suggested his name, where did his name come from? Did it come from the Minister's office, from the Minister himself? And if you could give us a detailed breakdown of what Mr Milne did, not just helped with NBN transition issues. What did he actually do? Because he was also employed by NBN, which seems to be a remarkable coincidence, and then got appointed to the board.
Thank you, Senator. I'll take that on notice.
AusTender indicates that this contract commenced on the 25th of September 2013. Is that correct?
I'm sure. Well, I only have the month, Senator, so I have no reason to doubt the date that you're mentioning.
So that's literally a week after the Minister was sworn in. So did that contract go through a process?
Well, I've taken on notice the question about the circumstances leading up to it. I'm happy
so
to add that.
Can you
scope
add what the
spirit of your
process
question
was?
to that.
But given there was only a week, it doesn't sound like you went through any search firm. It doesn't sound like you went through any process.
Sounds more like a direct selection, Senator.
Yeah, it sounds like a direct selection, which would mean that somebody was not, and the company is not on any of the government tender companies, is it?
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
Yeah. So, out of nowhere, the Minister's absolute best mate gets a $14,000 contract a week after being appointed.
I think you're editorialising or
no, I'm asking,
or
is that correct? So it sounds like Mr Clark said, it's a direct appoint. So we again come back to, and he's taken it on notice, who gave Mr Milne's name to Mr Clark or Mr Robinson, given Mr Clark had never heard of him, or never met him.
I'd never met him.
I'm sure you've probably heard of him, given that his name had been in newspapers previously. And I know that you followed newspapers out of the departmental clips closely, Mr Clark.
Indeed I did, Senator, and I still do.
And still do, I wasn't suggesting otherwise. But it's clear that there's no advertised process, no nothing. The department just appointed the Minister's mate for $14,000. So if we could get the exact process...
Mr Clark has indicated that
if we could get the exact
process on
who
notice.
Put his name on the table and what exactly did Mr Milne do for $14,000 of taxpayers' money while he was in your employ?
It's been taken on notice.
Okay, if you can provide that detail. On page 58 of NBN-Co's annual report, it states, and it talks about transactions with related parties. I'm sure you're aware of that, but I'll just read it out. During a year, a contract was entered into for $60,000 with Coco Milne Proprietary Limited, of which Justin Milne is a 100% shareholder. The contract is for the provision of strategic advice or recommendations as required by NBN-Co in relation to the negotiations between NBN-Co and Telstra Corporation Limited in respect of the proposed amendments to the Telstra definitive agreements. Mr Milne excused himself during discussions on this contract. The amount outstanding at 30th of June 2014 was $10,750. So it looks like the NBN board is now awarding contracts to its own members. This board member in particular was one of, as we understand, one of Mr Turnbull's picks. But the department has also awarded a contract to Mr Milne, who's obviously a mate of the minister. So surely there are governance issues that arise from this. There's got to be, governance issues around the whole procedure. So do you agree that there are governance issues around that whole procedure of the process?
No, I don't accept that. I've taken the detailed questions on notice, but the very transparency that you've quoted strikes me as addressing the primary concern regarding governance.
So you don't think that there's issues around the Public Governance, the Performance and Accountability Act, or issues such as that? GBE guidelines? You don't see anything there?
I don't, Senator.
Okay. Do you view does the department view these contracts as appropriate?
Well,
So the board needs to hire its own members.
I take responsibility for the $14,000 appointment that we previously canvassed, and the appropriateness of the one through the company is a question best addressed to the company. But the transparency around this strikes me as the primary defence response to any governance issues.
All right. I just want to talk about an issue, and I'm not sure, Mr Clark, whether you can help me, but the Minister may be able to. So, I understand that the federal member for Braddon, Mr Brett Whiteley, met with senior advisors in the Minister Turnbull's office on Friday to raise issues about the outcomes for the North West Coast following questions from a community forum held with Mr Turnbull last Monday. Was anybody from the department involved in those discussions that you're aware of?
No, I don't believe there are any departmental officers present, Senator, but it may be that they were and I'm not aware of it, but not to my knowledge. I will confirm that.
Can you confirm that, please?
Yeah.
And was the department asked to provide any information at all for those discussions?
Oh, quite possibly, but again, I don't have personal knowledge of that.
Are you
I'm happy
able
to take
to find that out
notice.
during the course of the day? And
certainly, Senator.
Yep, thank you. And I guess if so, if you were asked to provide information, can you outline what that was?
Yes, Senator, I'll take that on notice. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess maybe the Minister might be able to answer this or take it on notice. Do you know whether Mr Whiteley got the clarification that he was seeking to be able to inform the community about the NBN plans on the northwest coast of Tasmania?
I wasn't a party to any discussions there.
No,
so
I'm not suggesting you were, but obviously
so
you are the representing minister, and I guess I would have assumed that you would have had at least some knowledge of a discussion going on about the process on the northwest of Tasmania.
I'll take the question on notice.
Okay, thank you. You got any more, Stephen?
Not on this area.
We're done. Thanks, Anne.
Okay, no questions. I just quickly ask you how the restructuring of Tasma back into the agency is going.
Yes, thank you, Senator. So the timeline for that is subject to legislation, is that it would take effect on the 1st of July next year. We're working with the board, the presumptive outgoing board, and we're working closely with the staff on those procedures. A number of senior officers from the department are now engaging more deeply to get a deeper understanding of the work that TUSMA is doing, and we're thinking through the arrangements as to how that might best fit into the department structure. We've continued to provide the assurance to the staff in Melbourne that fulfil this role that I have no intention whatsoever of closing the Melbourne office or of relocating those staff.
Okay. All right, well, if there are no further questions, we will thank you very much.
Thank you,
I'm
Chair.
sure you'll be around today. And I now call officers from the NBN code.
He wants to break free.
Well, you can wait for me to introduce them.
Oh,
So I welcome officers from the NBN Co. Now, Mr. Adcock, Mr. Rowe, Mr. Simon, who would like to? You'd like to? Okay. Just for the record, when you introduce yourself, if you could just say the name, your name, and the capacity in which you appear. Would you like to make an opening statement?
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rowe.
Hey, good morning, Senators, and
we can get. Oh, it's been handed around. You need to give it a. Thank you.
no problem. Good morning, Senators. Thank you, Chair, for the invitation to make some opening remarks this morning. As I think you've been advised, Mr. Morrow, our Chief Executive, is unable to attend today as he is overseas, and he's asked me to represent him today. I apologise in advance for the change in accent from Mr. Morrow, but I'm sure if I speak slowly into the microphones and Hansard will be able to understand me. 23 years in Australia, but you never lose an accent, I'm afraid. I am joined today by my colleagues, Mr. Greg Adcock and Mr. John Simon. Mr. Adcock is our Chief Operating Officer and Mr. Simon our Chief Customer Officer. And they are also both doing their thing for men's health this month, as you can see. We hope together we can address all your queries on behalf of the company. If we cannot, we will attempt to get you answers as soon as possible within the morning session. I thought it might be useful to touch briefly on a few topical issues on the company, covered in the media, and also provide a general update of progress since we last gave evidence at the Senate Select Committee hearing in late September. Earlier this week, we released our 2014-17 corporate plan following its presentation to our government shareholders, and as expected, there was a wide range of media coverage on its content. We have made no excuses about the fact that this is a transition plan and largely a focus on fiscal 2015 forecasts. Of course, we would like to have had all the answers presented in a corporate plan, but we're simply not in a position to do that yet. There are too many unknowns. To do a reforecast beyond fiscal 2015, we would have had to make assumptions about a number of things that are still uncertain, such as the outcome and timing of commercial deals underway with Telstra and Optus, regulatory approvals and potential government policy changes that may come our way from the government's consideration of the Vertigan and Scales reviews. We've been criticised for the lack of detail in what is supposed to be a 3-year plan, but as we have said quite openly, we cannot generate reliable projections for the 2 out years just yet. That is why we've used the strategic review estimates for fiscal 2016 and 17 as our base estimates for the out years. We are currently very focused on a detailed operating and financial plan that will be completed once the unknowns are known. The result of this work will form the basis of the 2015 to 18 corporate plan. This plan will be the crucial guide as we move into the optimised MTM rollout period. As the company's Chief Financial Officer, I do see some positive signs emerging. The recent release of the company's first quarter results for fiscal 2015 has seen steady growth in serviceable premises active end users and our revenues. We've made significant progress over the last 12 months with a real focus on dealing with the issues around serviceable premises, not just past premises, and we continue to address issues with our construction partners and have made good progress with our trial programs. So the speed and quality of the ramp-up continues, but of course we need to accelerate as we move into calendar 2015 to reach the exponential shift that is required. The company is confident that our fiscal 2015 forecasts are achievable. Results are starting to reflect the positive and steady improvements we are making in construction, product development and the end user experience. The rollout of our FTTP, fixed wireless and satellite networks continues, and with the support of our customers, we are growing the end user active base on the NBN, moving from 9,000 to 10,000 end user activations per month at the beginning of this year to a run rate of approximately 22,000 per month at the moment. As well as stabilising the rollout, we've also been focused on connecting premises rather than passing premises. We are now cabling and making ready for service over 10,000 end user premises in multi-dwelling units per month on average. This was a major area of frustration for the community and our RSP customers. With our interim satellite service, we have added extra capacity for the 40,000 plus end users. We are getting ready to launch our long-term satellites next year, a service that will transform telecommunications in remote and regional Australia. I am pleased to report that this program is on track and that we recently reached 2 key milestones. Our first satellite came through the thermal vacuum test successfully, and our second satellite is now going through the same process. And the last 2 reflectors on a Ceduna ground station have been lifted into position, making the completion of all long-term satellite ground systems antenna installations. A total of 27 satellite antenna dishes have been successfully installed by our partners Viasat and SSL at the 10 NBN co-ground stations in some of the most remote locations in regional Australia. By the end of June 2015, we will have over 1 million premises ready for service on the NBN, as well as having connected almost 500,000 end users. We have been working towards the launch of FTTP, or fibre to the basement, and FTTN, or fibre to the node, the first of the new MTM technologies. Through our construction trials, we plan to have over 240,000 premises ready for connection via FTTN commencing July 2015. And by the end of first quarter 2015, we will have launched our FTTB service. During the last 5 months, we have also consulted with our customers to ensure that we get the MTM product constructs and service equation right. We are very conscious of the desire from the community for detailed rollout plans indicating which technology we will all be getting and when. And we understand the transition to the MTM is frustrating for many, but I can assure this committee that we are moving as fast as possible to provide as much certainty as we can. Just last week, we moved a step closer by announcing the high-level principles or business rules that we will use in determining which technology is likely to be deployed in each rollout area. These principles are necessary to meet the mandate given to us by government that we minimise peak funding, optimise economic returns, prioritise underserved areas and enhance the company's viability. The aim is to give some clarity to communities and our customers, the retail service providers, about the choices that we have to make. We will imminently be releasing more indicative details on technology and timing by area to our customers and the community once the analysis is complete. We also hope to release guidelines in the near future about a fibre on demand product for those wanting to purchase a fibre to the premise product if they are in an alternate technology area. And finally, we are also looking at co-funding investment opportunities for small communities wherever possible. So in conclusion, thank you for the opportunity, Chair, to make this statement. We welcome your questions, which we will attempt to answer to the best of our ability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roux. Before I go to Senator Conroy, can I just ask you a couple of questions about the 2014-7 corporate plan that you've discussed? In the past, there have been a number of issues because of the estimates of delivery in previous corporate plans, and obviously you've got a number of estimates in terms of what you're intending to achieve by the 2014-17 corporate plan. Can you explain how you approached that particular aspect of developing the plan?
Well, as I said in my opening statement, Senator, the corporate plan is really focused on the fiscal 15 year. The fiscal 15 approach to that was what one would normally see in any budget preparation. So we looked at the capacity of the industry. We looked at what rollout plans and activities could be possible. We looked at the work with our RSP customers and what activations we could put in place. And we looked at the profiling of that and when we could build up and ramp up. So we're confident that having done quite a lot of work on those aspects, that the actual timing and the ramp up and and therefore the end numbers are very achievable. And certainly when we look at the end of September, we're on target to meet the corporate plan targets.
Okay. Certainly the last thing the public can cope with is another overestimate that's undelivered. There's been some comments in the media by the opposition that the rollout has slowed down. In developing this corporate plan, has any evidence emerged to suggest that the rollout is slowing down? Well, no. When we actually look at the profiling and we look at the growth of the rollout is not slowing down. The rollout actually continues to expand through this year, and we have seen an acceleration of the rollout in the first quarter. I don't know if Mr. Adcock would like to add to that, but we're...
Look, I think our CEO is on the record as saying that late last year there was clearly issues in the industry that caused the rollout to slow down, but we've worked pretty hard at trying to get the industry stable and get to a constant rate, and I think that's evidence in the numbers that are being produced at the moment. And I think, as Mr. Roux said in his opening statement, we're reasonably confident of hitting our FY15 projections and forecasts.
Okay. Can you just give us an update on the accelerated rollout plan the company announced, particularly in relation to fibre to the basement?
Yeah, Mr. Simon.
Yeah. So yes, we're basically ensuring that we preserve the integrity of the business plan, and what we're doing there is focusing in those areas that have a higher penetration of MDUs. We also know that there's a higher ARPU that's associated with those end users, and we're bringing forward rollout into those areas to make sure that we both commercially compete with what else is out there, but also, more importantly, ensure that we provide access to those markets to our customers, the other RSPs, who want to go and provide services into those areas, and also preserve the, I guess, overall commercial plan that the NBN's underpinned by.
Yeah. Okay. Just finally, the Telecommunications Ombudsman earlier this year found that the NBN accounted for only 3% of industry complaints, but accounted for 25% of industry complaints about problems in getting an internet connection, and 40% of complaints about missing appointments for connections. Not a great result. Does the NBN predict that the number of complaints will be reduced once it increases the number of serviceable premises? Yeah, this is an area, Senator, that we're very, very focused on, and it's an area that Mr. Simon is very focused on, and we spend a lot of time making sure that our customer complaints are dealt with and continue to come down, and Mr. Simon can give you lots of detail on this.
Yes, Chair. So, I mean, if you look at that stat, 25% of industry complaints relating to internet connections, most existing organisations today that are connecting customers would be using ADSL2 or existing HFC infrastructure. Now, in all those cases, the greater majority of those premises have already got a lead-in. So there's already existing copper to a premise that could be active or it could be dormant, but it's less there. Or there's an existing HFC lead-in to a building or to a premise. It's either active or it may not be active. But the point is the lead-in's there. So this is fundamentally, the cause of this has been what we've talked about before, the fact that the rollout went down the street but did not include the delivery of the lead-in at that time. Over 50% of the root cause of the complaints deal with issues that are effectively caused by not having the lead-in. What we're doing now is rolling out, we've put new metrics into our RFS when we release an area ready for service to ensure that we've got a much higher penetration of lead-ins completed prior to the area being released for service. And of course we've also got the clean-up program, which we've talked about before, which is going back in and remediating those problems where there was no lead-in done, and also cleaning up the MDUs. So we definitely are confident that rate, the quantum will always go up if you think about the size of the NBN and how many premises you're going to be rolling out, but on a ratio basis we should expect to see that ratio of complaints per premises passed, connected and active come down, which we track weekly.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Simon. Senator Conroy.
Thanks. Just wondering, is there any other officers of the NBN with you other than support staff?
No, we have just the three of us today.
Just the three. Now, I appreciate that estimates was moved, and I know you were in the building. I think I saw you on the day of the last estimates, but tragic circumstances saw that postponed. So I appreciate that the change in date has made it more difficult to get the witnesses present. So I want to start with Mr. Morrow. He's in the US, did someone say?
That is correct, Senator, yes.
What's he doing there?
He had a arranged commitment, Senator, to be in the US, which he couldn't move.
And is it NBN related?
Some of it is NBN related, yes.
And what's the other non-part of it?
I understand he's attending a board meeting of a company he's on, and I think he's having some I think he was travelling to Singapore as well, I believe. So he had some travel work time.
Given he's attending a board meeting of another company, I'm assuming the other company's paid for his airfares to the United States?
I understand so, Senator, yes.
I would expect that to be the process.
You would.
So he's not involved in any of the litigation? He's not meeting with any lawyers of his former employees?
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
Thank you. Now, in terms of other attendees, I think this is now 3 strikes for Miss Chrysler, is it? Is that how we pronounce her name?
Miss Chrysler, yes.
Chrysler. She's failed to attend any of the meetings that we've requested her to attend. Once she was on leave. What's her excuse today? Is she doing her nails?
Senator, I actually have no idea what Miss Chrysler's doing today.
She's been requested now 3 times. Mr. Morrow told us that she would be coming. Is there any reason she's not here?
Well, Senator, I don't know what Ms. Cresswell's doing, but as I said in my opening statement, I would hope that Mr. Simon, Mr. Adcock and I can answer questions.
It's good of you to hope, but we request witnesses. So it's not for you to hope that you can answer the questions, it's for the witnesses to turn up, or we will subpoena them. Are we clear on the process of the Senate? We request witnesses and you provide them.
Well, Senator, as I said, Mr. Adcock, Mr. Simon and I will answer your questions.
So you're saying that you won't be bringing Ms. Chrysler or other witnesses other than you 3 in future?
No, Senator. We will look at attendees in the future when time comes.
No, you're missing the point. You don't get to look at and decide. The Senate committees decide who we would like to call. And if they have a legitimate reason why they're not present, then that's fine.
Chair.
But if you're simply saying you're not going to be providing witnesses to us, we will subpoena them. Are we clear on the process?
Senator, I'm not saying...
If I could just interpose, sorry, Chair, and you'll correct me, Chair, if I'm wrong, I know. But for Senate estimates, government agencies are called in turn, and government agencies present their senior executive management and the staff who they are confident will, in most circumstances, be able to address the questions which are posed. But my understanding is that it's essentially for Senate estimates, the agencies put their senior management forward and that the agencies determine, because they're in the best position to know which officers are in the appropriate position to answer questions that are likely to come forward.
That is absolutely correct.
Refusing to supply witnesses that are requested is a contempt of the Senate. So I want to make it very clear. If you have the attitude that you're describing, then you'll be treating this committee with contempt.
Sorry, again, Chair,
Complete
Chair,
contempt.
Chair, if I may.
Mr Morrow, in fact, indicated that Ms Chrysler would be attending. She couldn't last time, and now you're saying, no, that's not going to happen.
No, Senator, I simply said that the three officers here today will do our best to answer your questions.
Well, I'd like to ask some questions about HFC. Any experts in the room? No. Okay. So, as you can see, you deciding who comes to the meetings doesn't assist this committee in any way, shape or form. I have quite legitimate questions about the HFC rollout, and you have not provided a single witness who is an expert in the area. You've just appointed and created a whole new section, and you've failed to bring him.
Well, Senator, if you have questions on HFC, I'm sure
No,
Mr.
see, but that's the
Adcock-
point. I don't have to tell you what questions I'm going to ask. That's not how the Senate estimates process works.
Chair,
You provide the.
Chair,
You provided
again,
three of your seven, or if you count Mr Morrow, eight
if I may
officers.
interpose,
Please,
Chair.
Minister.
And again, you'll correct me if I'm mistaken, but the process for Senate estimates is that senators will indicate if there are particular agencies that they want to come forward. I know some estimates you don't have to indicate. There is a matter of course brought forward, but other estimates colleagues do indicate the particular agencies that they wish to ask questions of. But I'm not familiar with the practice for Senate estimates where senators flag the particular individuals who they think should be representing particular agencies, unless they might flag that there's a particular area of questioning that they may have, which has been known to happen.
We are not required to indicate our line of questions to the Minister,
I didn't suggest,
the committee chair,
I didn't suggest
or the
that you were.
officers
I'm just
at
saying
the
that
table.
sometimes senators, to facilitate
And what we do
the good
is we
practice
send
of
a list
committees
of
do
names.
indicate areas that they may want to
We send a
have
list
questions.
of
I'm not
names.
saying I'm hearing double.
Yeah, indeed.
Chair,
Please continue.
but I'm not suggesting that senators have to. I'm just saying that senators sometimes do indicate areas that they may have a particular interest in questioning.
And we've indicated that by giving a list of names of people. And
To this committee?
And Mr Morrow indicated that Ms Chrysler would be coming, and Mr Rue is now indicating that the company reserves the right not to bring people, even when they've been requested,
Well, Senator,
which is a clear contempt of this committee and the Senate and the people of Australia.
Senator Conroy.
Well, if you were actually running the committee, which you're not, Senator, that may be
He's
the case.
attempting
But
to.
the committee,
No, I'm
the
simply
committee,
asking for the
members of the committee,
officers to
the
actually
members
be
of the
polite.
committee, under the stewardship of the chair, run the committee and determine the practices of the committee.
Now, the floor of the Senate determine the practices
Well,
of the committee.
Senator Conroy,
not the chair.
Senator Conroy,
Correct. The floor of the Senate.
Senator Conroy, you're absolutely correct in your comment that the floor of the Senate determines the procedures that occur here. However, the floor of the Senate has not determined what you're requesting. It is not usual practice for Senate estimates to summons witnesses to committees. It is not usual practice to summons witnesses. It is up to the agency, as the Minister quite rightly pointed. Senator, do you think I would be allowed to finish my...
Not if you're going to mislead the...
Senator, I would request you respectfully to allow me to finish, and if you wish to take issue at the end of what I've got to say, you are more than welcome to do so, but I think out of courtesy you should allow me to finish. It is usual practice. It's not usual practice to summons witnesses to estimates hearings. It is usual practice that the agency chooses who it will send to a hearing. It is also usual practice, where possible, that the Chief Executive or the most senior member of the agency attends. And as you've rightly pointed out, Mr Morrow is unable to be here through previous engagements. I would also point out to the Senator that in this particular instance, this is an additional day that has come about at very short notice because of an unusual circumstance. The death of the previous Prime Minister didn't allow the kind of lead time we normally would for dates. So we have an unusual circumstance for this particular hearing. There was not a lot of lead time, and for that reason I think that you could probably allow the agency a little bit of latitude, that the Chief Executive isn't here. And I think if in future you wish a particular line of questioning, perhaps you might like to tell the voting members of the committee when the timetable for the hearings and estimates are put together that you would like a certain line of questioning, and we'll certainly relay that to the agency on your behalf.
Okay. Unfortunately, the Chair has misled you, so just so you're clear that you don't have the right to say no and decide yourselves. And if you'd have said to me Ms Chrysler's had a prior engagement and she was on the moon, I would accept that there was a reason she couldn't be here. So to strip away the rubbish that the Chair's just described, I've got no problem that Mr Morrow was called away because of a prior engagement. But you're not offering that as your excuse for why she's here. She's not on the moon and she didn't have a prior engagement. You've just decided she's not turning up.
Senator, I actually said I didn't know where she was.
No, but you've decided, you've reviewed who was requested and you've decided who will attend. Okay. And the Chair cannot protect you from this. And other committees and the floor of the Senate will ultimately not back the Chair up on this. So you can't keep hiding behind spurious rulings from the Chair. You will be accountable to the Parliament of Australia for your expenditure. And you've got at least 6 or 7, I'm not sure the current head count, senior executives. You've brought 3. I accept Mr Morrow's away. But you've clearly taken a decision among yourselves. You're only sending a minimum representation, which I repeat, is treating this committee, the Parliament and people of Australia with contempt.
Chair, through you.
We do not have to.
Chair,
sorry,
you.
Could I finish? I let you finish. You asked me to finish.
Please,
if I could finish.
Well,
okay.
No, let
if I could finish.
because we have much.
So I am not required to advise the committee or
no one has
NBN.
suggested that.
So could I finish?
No, please allow Senator Conroy to finish.
Well, Senator Conroy, you said
Senator Rushton, I haven't finished,
Mr.
Senator Fifield. Senator Rushton indicated that if I wanted to give a line of questions, well, I don't want to. I have no intention
Senator
of.
Rushton did not say that you
we
had
politely
to.
request.
I did not say that you had
we
to.
politely request individuals to attend so we can pursue a line of questions in their area of responsibility. It's quite clear from the response from Mr Roux that NBN have no intention of complying with those requests. They intend to decide. Now, unless Mr Roux wants to correct me on this and say if there's sufficient time and not short notice and people don't have pre-existing arrangements and there isn't the circumstances where committees have been postponed due to unfortunate circumstances. But Mr Roux is not making an attempt to correct that. Okay. He's sitting there and saying to us, we'll decide who attends, and if you'd like to tell us what you want to ask, we might supply somebody else. That's not how it works. That's treating the committee with contempt, and it's a poor reflection on you, Mr Roux.
No one has said that, Senator.
Yeah.
Well, Mr Roux can speak for himself right now.
No,
okay,
Mr.
well, I'm
Roux
about to
hasn't said that.
Minister, to conclude this particular discussion of debate.
You don't get to conclude.
Senator, you finished. Senator,
I'm offering Mr Roux an opportunity.
Okay, well, I'm taking charge of my committee and I'm intending to give you a piece of advice, and you can take it as you will. The committee was the one who gave the opportunity to the NBN. We requested that they provide certain people. They came back to us and said the people that they had available for today's hearing were... Senator, we are playing respectfully, listening to people and not interjecting. They came back to the committee and they advised us that the 3 people that are sitting before us would be attending today, and advised that there were other members of the NBN Co that were not able to attend. The committee did not seek to request any further that the other people attend this hearing. So to suggest that Mr Roux in some way has belligerently not made the people available that you're requesting is actually simply not true. We took no further action when we were advised by NBN Co that these were the 3 people who were able to attend today. We accepted that and took no further action. So if you have issue, you need to take it up with the committee and not with NBN Co. So if we could move on to questioning.
No, I decide my line of questioning, and I'm going to continue to ask Mr Roux about the witnesses and why people aren't here. And more importantly, his earlier statement that the NBN Co have decided who they think should come and can answer all of our questions. And clearly witnesses at the table can't. I want to have a detailed conversation about HFC. And you have not brought the senior executive.
Can I suggest you pose your questions and officers
and you can
will
take them on
see how
notice
they...
and we can get them back in
You haven't
February.
asked a single question,
Yeah.
so ask a question to give officers the opportunity to endeavour to answer them.
We have a
I'm perfectly entitled to
we have a
ask
point of
my
order.
questions.
We have a
Oh,
point of
sorry.
order.
Well, saying you should do so.
Minister, point of order, Senator Bushby.
Senator, I've been in here for about 10 minutes now, and I've heard the Chair's made rulings, but I've heard nothing but Senator Conroy making statements. You mentioned that you want to ask
having
questions.
a discussion, not asking
No,
questions.
this is a forum for senators to ask questions, in my understanding, not for people to debate or to sit there and make statements.
Well, sorry, the chair made a statement, and I'm responding to his statement.
The Chair is entitled to make
And I'm
statements.
responding to it.
Well, you're
my
not
question to
entitled
Mr. Rue is: do you stand, Mr. Rue? Do you stand by your statement that you'll decide who comes to the committee?
No, Senator, what I said was that Mr Adcock, Mr Simon and I will do our best to answer your questions. That's what I
Doing
said.
your best isn't good enough when we ask for officers to attend. So will you commit that to supply the officers, subject to external events and other commitments? Do you commit to provide the officers at the table to answer the questions that we request? And we write to you and we've requested. It's not like we didn't give you notice. We've written to you and requested. So do you commit to do that?
Senator Conroy, I have answered that question.
No, you don't get to answer it.
Well,
Mr.
I
Rue
do,
gets to
Senator
answer it.
Conroy. I do
The
get to
question
answer
is
it.
of Mr. Rue.
It's about the conduct of the committee. I've advised you of the conduct of the committee in relation to the matter that you're raising, and you are somehow suggesting that Mr. Rue has some involvement in the conduct of the committee. Well, he doesn't.
Mr. Rue has indicated that they decide who the witnesses they think
He
can
didn't
answer.
say that at all.
No, yes, he did.
No, he didn't, Senator Conroy.
He said,
Okay.
we
Well-
picked us three because we think we can answer all your questions and
And
we'll do
that's
our best to try.
entirely what he is entitled
Yes.
to do so. The agency is entitled to do so, and
So,
the committee
Mr.
chose
Rue.
not to pursue it.
Mr. Rue, if the committee asks you to provide X number of officers at the table, do you commit to provide them subject to the reasonable reasons that would be put forward as why they couldn't attend?
Senator,
Sorry, I'd like an answer.
in Tasmania, how that's
I would
progressing.
like an answer to my question, and he was about to
What
before
was
he
your
was
question?
interrupted. I asked him if he would commit on behalf of NBN Co to provide the witnesses that are requested. He was about to answer before he was rudely interrupted.
What, by you?
And then I'd like to get on to asking my questions.
That would be a good idea. Mr. Rue, have you got an answer to that question, or would you prefer to?
well, I simply just want to reinforce that what I've just been handed, that on the 7th of November we advised this committee that the three of us here today, myself, Mr Simon, Mr Adcock, would be available. We also said that Mr Morrow, Mr Rousselot, Mr Whitcomb and Ms Kaiser were not available, and we said we trust the committee finds these arrangements satisfactory and look forward to receiving the full programme when it becomes available, and we didn't hear back, Senator. So on that basis...
Okay, so why is, given you're saying you don't know, why is Ms Chrysler not available? Why is Mr Whitcomb not available?
Senator,
why is the other officers of NBN Co that were requested by the committee not available?
Senator, I don't track all my colleagues' diaries. I don't know what they're doing today. I'm sorry. I do know Mr Morrow is overseas.
And that's understood and accepted without any protest.
But
the
I
argument
think
here is that you are deciding not to bring witnesses.
I think the point here, Chair, is that NBN Co did respond to the committee through the Secretary and did advise of what they were proposing, which meant that the ball was then in the court of the committee if the committee did not think that those arrangements were satisfactory. At that point, it really ceases to be a matter for NBN Co and becomes a matter for the committee.
Yes. I believe we've been trying to say that on numerous occasions today, Senator Fifield. Do you wish to go into
Yes,
question?
I do. Now, you indicated in your opening statement, Mr Rue, that you'd increased the satellite capacity by 40,000. I was just wondering if someone at the table could take us through how that process worked. My last recollection of an update to the committee was you'd increased by about 7,000 or 8,000.
Yes, certainly, Senator. Mr.
So what
Mr.
has
Simon?
been...
I think the statement said that, I think just want to point of clarification. The statement says that we've released additional capacity to the 40,000 end users of the interim satellite service. So we have not been adding more users.
So there's no extra
to that.
capacity. I remember the conversation that you'd increased it a bit, but you'd also been able to free up some extra
We've
capacity.
now completed the implementation of that extra capacity that we talked about, and that in the satellite space is now in place.
Thank you. It was the way it was expressed, so understood. Thank you for that. Now, how many MDUs have you now connected? You indicated that you were getting up to speed on that. So if I could start by just how many you've connected in general, and then I wanted to ask you specifically about the fibre to the flat, if we can just differentiate it in terms of a conversational unit competing with the TPG offering. So if I could just get an indication of MDUs.
So this is are you asking the question of how many MDUs have we connected in our accelerated MDU program?
Yeah.
So we have connected our initial 12, which we were trialling under this new program, and now we are rolling out that program more in earnest. And as I said, indicated, we'll be targeting to connect at least 20 a month in the near term.
Okay.
These are in the areas that we have not rolled out. These are in.
Okay. So this is where you're in effect competing with TPG and anybody else who wants to make an offering. You've targeted specific areas.
Correct.
What's the take up within the MDUs? So how many? What word do you want to use? Premises,
first 12?
Flats, units. What word would you prefer?
Oh, it's MDUs. Yeah, that's fine.
No, but I'm going to ask you about how many premises there are within an MDU. And
how many end user premises?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
So how many within an MDU that you've now connected? How many are in the 12?
So all of those MDUs that we've done in the 12 are ready to can order a service. They're at service class 2, which means the lead-in is done, and the take-up and RSPs are now selling into those MDUs, and they've been doing that for the last month or so, 6 to 8 weeks. So it's fairly early days.
Yep.
But the take-up rate is above the projected take-up rates that we have. So as you know, we generally have an 18-month period for take-up, and we've seen that take-up rate in those MDUs achieve beyond the expected take-up rates.
What was your forecast take-up rate?
Senator Conroy, could I just check with the witnesses and the minister? We have a photographer who'd like to take some photographs during proceedings. Is that okay?
Fabulous.
With you?
Always fun.
Is it raising money for Movember?
Can you particularly focus on the moustaches? Okay? There's some pretty impressive moustaches at the table, and they deserve publicity. This is for a good cause.
This is for a very
good cause. Mr. Adcock and Mr. Simon will give their website addresses if you want to sponsor those beasts on their lips.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you.
I think you can take that as long as you...
Real close up, in tight. Smile for the cameras.
Whilst that's happening, could I just put on the record what I already knew, but just want to confirm? NBN did not pay for Mr. Morrow's trip, but just to be very clear, we did pay for one night's hotel accommodation whilst he was on NBN business.
No, fair enough.
Thank you.
So just coming back to what I was trying to get to was how many premises within the MDUs, so were there 10 in some, 100? I was trying to get a total number of units, flats, whatever you call them.
I'll take it on notice, but I'll give you what I believe necessary to confirm it.
Yeah.
I think the MDUs that we've connected are roughly 100 end-user premises each, on average.
100 each? Okay.
Yeah. And the take-up is around in the first month about 6%. But that's off the top of my head, I don't actually have that.
But that's higher than your forecast?
Monthly take-up would normally be around 4 to 5%, yeah.
Okay. Great, okay. And you're now moving on to try and roll out 20 a month, did you say, in this program?
Yes, we obviously want to accelerate that and go into those areas, and we expect that in the near term we'd get to about 20 MDUs a month.
And how long is this program planning on running, or is this a permanent program?
It'll be a permanent program because we're going to bring forward the rollout in those areas. Yeah.
Now, do you have a reasonably clear idea where TPG are rolling out to?
So I think it's important here that we're not following or focusing on TPG. This is clearly, like any commercial organisation would look at competitive threats, and therefore we've identified that those areas are open to competition, Therefore, it's important for us to go and provide a service into those areas, and we're determining the rollout on our own criteria based on where we believe we can roll out effectively with the right level of connectivity and turning on the right level of revenue.
Sure. But you're not rolling out in, for instance, Ballarat, CBD. You're rolling out in the rough areas. I'll say rough. The rough areas where TPG have announced that they're deploying fibre to the basement from their announcement from last year.
Yeah, the best way I could answer that, Senator, would be we're rolling out where you can identify a high concentration of MDUs to a higher ARPUs, where there's also competitive metro fibre in place. And therefore,
you won't know exactly where every bit of TPG's
correct.
is, but you can make a reasonable guess.
Yeah.
An informed assessment rather than a reasonable guess to help you out there. So don't sound too woolly. Now, I think I asked previously that all of the MDUs in the switch-off areas had been connected. That's correct?
All of the MDUs in areas that are up for disconnection?
Yeah, where you've disconnected. So there was no MDU that was left unconnected?
No, there are some premises that we moved into an infill region because of some technical complications, but relatively small for the first 15.
Yeah. No, that's what I thought was the case. Now, in terms of the 20 a month, what's your target for the middle of next year? Do we just go 6 times 20, or you're hoping to expand that program?
So obviously we're at the early days of pulling that out. The initial 20 is our first goal. We'll continue to do whatever it takes to bring forward that rollout and expand it, so we don't expect to sit at that number for forever. We would hope that that would climb, but I don't have a number at this point.
And just so we're clear, when we're talking about connecting up the apartments within the, or premises within the MDUs, we're talking about fibre all the way to the apartment. We're not talking about FTTP?
No, we're talking fibre to the building. So it's fibre in the building and then an FTTP solution there.
Okay, so...
However...
sorry. I'm sorry. I've misunderstood, so I wanted to come back now, unfortunately, and revisit. So when you're saying you've connected 12, that's with NBNco's FTTP, not as was earlier speculated by, I think, Mr Morrow and Mr Adcock, not being pejorative when I say that we would be building fibre to the premise to those. Yeah. So can I just clarify what it is that you're rolling out?
So we are rolling out the NBN to MDUs in areas that we had previously not targeted in the rollout. We're bringing forward that rollout. The first 12 buildings, we've rolled out fibre to the premise in all the end user premises. The following buildings, we intend to connect with fibre to the basement or building as the base solution. However, we're also technology agnostic in that sense. If a body corporate wants us to deploy fibre to all the end user premises, then we would look at a co-payment situation and consider that as well.
Okay, so the 12 have been fibre to the premise?
Yes.
But the ongoing program is not fibre to the premise?
No.
It's
fibre to
the basement. And are you targeting, or have you come across, you may not know, have you come across any rival FTTP equipment in any of the buildings you've targeted yet? Because, as you'd be aware, there are a whole range of technical issues if you have competing equipment in the same basement. So do you, if you find there, firstly, have you? Secondly, if you have, do you still go ahead and deploy it, or do you withdraw and just go to the next building? What's the strategy?
So in the first 12, was there fibre to the premise? I think
fibre to the basement. TPG are offering fibre to the basement.
Yeah. So in the first 12 that we've done, they're all fibre to the premise. So the issue you're raising is not really of concern. In the remaining ones, in the future ongoing ones, then yes, we would expect that at some point we will enter into an MDU that may have a competing technology set, and we would still intend to deploy.
So you'd deploy into the same basement, so you'd have two,
yes.
Let's just for simplicity say, boxes in the same basement.
Yes.
Okay. engineers tell me that there is a difficulty having two boxes in the same basement working off the same copper. Do you have plans to deal with that, where you intend to deploy in direct competition in the same basement?
Yes, I think you're referring to some of the crosstalk and interference that can incur there. So we do have plans, and that technology is also improving, and it's also a function of whether everyone turns on vectoring or doesn't turn on vectoring. So there's a range of options and capabilities you have there. Okay.
So with the first 12, vectoring doesn't matter. With the ongoing 20, these fibre to the basements, are you saying they are? Is it going to be vectored or not vectored?
We have either option to put in vectoring or not put it in. So we'll assess that as required.
So assess whether you need to, depending on whether the speeds are... vectoring doesn't improve a speed. It helps a bundle maintain consistent speed across all of them. That's roughly correct?
Well, it does improve speed, but you're talking short distances
very
generally,
short
so therefore it's not necessarily needed in all situations.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to understand, what judgment you make on that.
Yeah.
Okay. I might come back to some more questions on that. I just wanted to move on to probably Mr Rue now. I'm working off page 51 of your corporate plan, Exhibit 9.6.
Sorry, Sandra, what page was that?
Page 51,
Thank you.
Exhibit 9-6. And I just wanted to confirm that the incremental and cumulative figures listed in the indicative profile for FY14 in this exhibit are actuals.
They are, Sandra, yes.
And the corporate plan, page 50, and your annual report, page 27, indicates that they are. So I just wanted to confirm that was the case. So
yes, they are, Sandra.
Now, I need you to help me here. The exhibit sets out the equity assumptions that the current management made for the MTM in the strategic review.
Yes.
Compared to the actual figures for FY14.
Yes.
And an indicative profile of current assumptions beyond that.
Yes.
So NBN Co required about 853 million less equity in FY14 than the forecast in the strategic review for the MTM. So 853 million less is what you're forecasting than the strategic review forecast.
Less receipts of cash from the government, Sandra, yes.
Yeah, so I was going to come to what had caused that. Sure. So, but just to confirm, it's 853 million less equity than the strategic plan's forecast.
Yes, that's correct, Sandra. 9271 minus 8418, yes.
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 And NBN Co now assumes that it will require about 1.1 billion less equity in FY15 than the forecast in the strategic review.
That's correct, Sandra, yes.
So that's about 2 billion less by 2015 than assumed by the current management for the MTM model in the strategic review. That's correct. Just maths. Okay, yes. Good. So the actual incremental figure for 2014 equity in the corporate plan and annual report, 3.19 billion.
Yes, sir.
Is also $210 million less than what is set out in the May budget papers, 3.4 billion.
I don't know the answer to that, but I'll take that as being correct.
So when did the NBN Co submit its equity profile to the government for the budget? It's possible it's before you started.
Sorry, it's before my time.
It is.
I would have assumed it was an initial estimate in November and then updated in March, but I don't know.
I think that's the process. I mean, you're probably just at the beginnings of that for next year's financial budget. That sounds about right. So did the equity profile need to be revised or resubmitted at any time prior to the budget? So from that process when it was first advised in November-ish and then possibly revised in...
I believe from memory there was an update in March, actually, now you asked me. But again, Sandra, I didn't start until the 1st of July, but I believe that was the case. I believe there was an updated profile given to the government for 14 and 15 in March, yes.
Yeah. So, but the budget paper was the latest. There was no other revision between the budget paper and...
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And you've started since then, but the budget would have come down.
Yep.
Okay, so could you take us through what the 200 million difference between the budget profile and the actual figure for FY14 is?
Senator, I'm sorry, it's before my time. I don't know the answer to that.
Are you able to take on notice, or during the course of the morning, someone behind you could email?
Sure.
I'm sure they're tragically having to watch and listen. They would hopefully, someone who was there prior to you could provide some information to Mr Macaulay behind you, and then he can, as he's been doing, come up and give it to you. So the question is, why is there that difference? Now, current NBN co-management has revised down heavily its forecast equity requirements for the next 2 years, or to be more precise, having been through this myself, you've pushed these equity injections out to the future years, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So why did you require $853 million less equity in FY 2014 than the forecasts that your own strategic review made for the MTM?
Yes, Senator, if I could answer if I can answer that question by, if you refer to page 50, it's section 9.5.1. I'm sorry, 9.5.1 and 9.5.2. There was a change in how the NBN was funded by the government. The drawdown of equity doesn't actually necessarily represent the spend, and the reason for that is that NBN Co used to have substantial cash balances on hand. The equity funding arrangement was changed in the back end of fiscal 14, whereby instead of receiving what was essentially 6 months' worth of cash, the company now receives 2 months' worth of forward expectations. So these numbers are gross equity numbers. They don't equity injection numbers. I'm sorry, they don't take into account any cash balances we have on hand. So the vast majority of the difference between the 15.6 to 13.6 is the change of that equity profile. It doesn't actually represent a reduction of spend over the years 14 to 15.
Okay. Just building on that, looking at corporate plan, page 50, and I think you might have been referring to
Page 50, Senator? Sorry.
Yeah, 50.
Yep.
You say it reflects actuals for 2014 and reduced cash balances to reflect recently agreed amendments to the equity funding agreement, which is what I think you've been describing. But your annual report indicates that NBN Co's cash balances rose markedly during FY 2014, from about $100 million at 30 June 2013 to about $500 million at 30 June 2014. That's your annual report, page 98.
Yeah, Senator.
Your annual report also indicates on page 107 that between February 2014 and June 2014, NBN Co received about $2 billion in equity payments from the government. So I'm unsure how your reforecast equity profile is just due to a reduced cash balance. So I'm hoping you can take me through a slightly more detailed explanation of that.
Yes, Senator. Can I refer you to page 79 of the annual report, which is the what's called a statement of financial position, or which used to be called balance sheet. If you look at the first line, cash and cash equivalent, which you were referring to, but if you look down 5 lines below, it's held to maturity investment. The way accounting standards require you to present cash balances is cash on demand, if you will, and then cash invested for several months. So because NBN Co is receiving cash in advance of its needs, if you will, it was putting money on short-term 30 to 90-day balances and beyond in some cases. So you've actually got to add those two numbers together. It's essentially cash. So the balances at 30 June 2013 was 103 million plus 915 million, which is $1,018,000,000, if my maths are correct, as against about 745 at the end of June. The other thing to take into account that the differentials grows as the activity grows, because the cash needs are greater, and therefore having 6 months as against the 2 months is offer a greater cash need, if you will, if that makes sense.
Okay. So I'm trying to understand the cash versus your actual expenditure. So
yeah.
Could you just take me through, because it still seems like there's, on the surface, I mean, I appreciate what you've just described, on the surface it looks like it represents less expenditure. So could you just take me through?
Yeah, there was slightly less it's certainly true that there was slightly less expenditure in the, as I think is indicated actually on page 50. There was slightly less expenditure in 14 in capital expenditure than the strategic review. Most of that, from looking at it, was very short-term timing differences that's actually picked up on our 15 capital expenditure profile, which we are currently on budget. So essentially there was some small timing differences in terms of, small in the scheme of NBN, I mean, in fixed wireless satellite payments, and some IT spend which was spent early in 15 rather than 14. Now, whether that reflects your earlier question, I don't know. I'll have to get
No, thank you. That's also fixed wireless and
satellite and some IT spend.
So, what was the shortfall in IT spend?
Oh, look, Senator, I actually again, I'm sorry, that's before my time, and I don't know the details of that, but and I'm not sure the strategic review would have been done at the level of project by project anyway. But certainly looking at the profile of spend in IT and network design, etc., between 14 and 15, between the strategic review and both our actuals and our projections, there's a small difference.
As I said, and I appreciate timing is always an exciting thing for accountants.
Yeah,
but again, on the surface...
sorry, Senator, the other issue is it seems to be assumptions around working capital as well, which I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, well,
it's working capital equity, and there's some timing between...
No, those are what I'm trying to
understand.
Unpack at the moment.
When you look at 14 and 15 in total, and you take away the timing of payments and the equity funding, it's essentially the same spend between the corporate plan and the strategic. Between the corporate plan and the strategic plan.
Because on the surface, it doesn't look like that.
I understand.
It looks substantially less. And
the reason I can answer your question is because I noticed that myself, and I obviously had a look to see why it was. Yeah.
Well, if you could just take on notice to just give us a written explanation.
Sure.
Along the lines with the extra bits that you said.
Sure.
I wouldn't expect you to readily have at hand, but if you could just give us a more detailed explanation of that would be very helpful.
So did you understand my answer to need?
I would probably like to see it in writing so I could take some advice on it as well. I've lived through the very discussions myself in the past, so I just want to be able to have a look at if you could break down. If you could break down the parts that are fixed wireless.
I'm getting a nod from the back, so we'll
Right, thank you. Break down the fixed wireless, satellite, the IT spend, and if you could just show us what the timing issues were.
Yeah, there is. I have to just point out there is some difficulties in the analysis because of the more detail in our budget than there necessarily was in the strategic review.
Yeah.
So.
I'm sure you're with a little bit more time.
So we will do
your written answer can break that out, but hopefully you have all access to the methodology of Mr. Rousselot's mind. He does still work there occasionally, so good luck with that one. So just moving on. We've had some discussion in the past about... So working capital is deferred capital expenditure. We agree?
It's the fact that the timing of payments on construction build is different from the actual construction build. And obviously as the bill grows, the working capital grows. And,
sure.
and I think there were differences in assumptions between between
if
the
you could set
strategic
out-
plan and what's
yeah.
actually happening.
No,
In other words, we're not spending the cash as quickly,
Yeah,
which is a good thing.
No, I'm not being critical. But I'm just trying to understand the difference, what that timing issue has become, and if you could give us just a breakdown of what those timing differences are, rather than simply just saying, look, it's just a timing difference. If you could give us a written explanation of that. Now, we have had some lengthy discussion previously over the what's known as the Melton 10 trial, and Mr Adcock indicated there was a peer review process underway. Is that completed?
That is completed, Senator, yes.
Now, the Melton 10 presentation said that for the build in Melton 10, NBN Co directly engaged lower tier contractors, namely Australian Broadband Company, Cellumetrics, Comms Connect and LinkTech, to carry out the works. An answer to a question on notice says that these were the contractors engaged, so just confirming the Melton 10 presentation was correct on that.
Correct, yes, confirmed.
Now, the Melton 10 presentation said that for the build in Melton 10 at the point of ready for service, 90% of the build drops at Melton 10 were completed to service class 2. Another answer to a question on notice confirms that, and I'm quoting, at the point of ready for service, 90% plus of build drops at Melton 10 were completed to service class 2. So the presentation was correct on that.
That's correct.
The Melton 10 presentation said that the build in Melton 10 smaller diameter cable was deployed, which was 10 to 20% faster to deploy. Mr Adcock, you agreed with this at the last hearing. And another question on notice confirms that NBN Co has used the smaller diameter cable in 64 of the 82 FSAMs designed since January 14. No argument with that?
No argument.
So the Melton 10 presentation was correct on all those facts?
On those points, yes.
On those points, yeah. So the Melton 10 presentation said that for the build in Melton 10, RFS was reached on 23rd of July 2014, and that was confirmed by the Telstra's wholesale NBN Co rollout schedule, which states that Melton 10 went RFS on the 23rd of July 2014. We still agree that that was the case? I think last time you said you didn't want to dispute the Telstra.
I didn't want to dispute the Telstra deal.
Yeah,
and
so we still don't dispute
took that
it?
on notice or responded. I must admit I haven't delved into that further. But
Yeah, no, I'm assuming we still agree that
I'm
that was...
assuming,
Yeah.
Okay, Senator Conroy, given it's 10:30, where the committee will suspend until 10:45. Senator Ludlam.
Sorry, I was still going through a list of questions so I wasn't finished the line of questions. I'm happy to defer to Senator Ludlam, but normally you would say, had you finished the questions?
I'm just assuming that you've got many more questions and you're going to go for a lot longer. It's just that Senator Ludlam has to go.
I'm happy to share them around, but I just wanted to indicate I hadn't finished my questions yet.
Oh.
I won't use up all the time.
No, it's okay, go for it.
Okay.
Thanks,
Senator
Chair.
Ludlam.
Look, I want to concentrate a bit on an area that doesn't seem to have had a great deal of exposure, considering that it will comprise just under 30% of the rollout. You didn't mention the HFC network in your opening statement, as far as I could tell, Mr Rue. It's barely glanced on in the updated corporate plan. In fact, I think I could find about 3 references to it. So I just want to focus on that. Can you update us on the status of any HFC cable trials that you've got underway, and maybe just start with a big picture? Where is that section of the network sit at the moment?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for your question. I can give you the big picture, and I think that Mr Adcock can give you any technical details or add to my answer. But we're obviously in early stages of planning HFC centres, and we clearly don't have access to any HFC networks at this stage. We are certainly very focused on matters like IT, product development, how we will do the lead-in MDU programme supply chain. We would like to be in a position to launch HFC as soon as we can, clearly. But at the moment we're still in discussions with various players, including Telstra and Optus. You will be aware that we have appointed an executive, Dennis Steiger, to head up this area, and he has great experience in running and building HFC networks overseas.
Before we go too much further, and I suspect Senator Conroy might agree, can we put our request on the record that that officer attend either the next budget estimate session or the next select committee hearing, whichever comes first?
Yeah, we will take that.
Thanks.
We'll take that on notice.
Yeah, that's right.
No, you don't need to take it on notice. You can say yes, he'll come.
We're formally requesting the presence of that
we
officer.
take your formal request. Mr. Adcock, would you like to add anything else?
Just building on what Mr. Roos said, clearly we're in discussions with both the asset owners at the moment in negotiations. So as that progresses, there are requests in the market for expertise coming in around the head-end equipment. That's in the procurement discussion process at the moment. And the sort of plan is being finalised subject to the successful negotiations with the asset owners.
Can you provide us, maybe on notice, with an accurate set of maps of exactly what the footprint of the two HFC networks is? Because it's actually remarkably difficult to find.
We could take it on notice, Senator, and absolutely. We have to check. We have been provided some information as part of the negotiations.
I would hope so.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've been at it for a year.
But I am not personally aware of the confidentiality provisions, but to the extent we can, I'll take it on notice to get what we have to you to the extent we can.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I can't imagine that the footprint is likely to be commercial in confidence. I mean, you can see the cables down on the streets.
I agree, but as you've just articulated yourself, it's very difficult.
Too, but Telstra won't give you a
it's
map.
Getting very difficult. You said yourself it's difficult to get the information, and as we've gone through the process, I'm not saying it's being difficult, but
Google Maps
the accuracy
tend
of
to
the
make that
information.
somewhat of an obsolete.
If you're able to provide us with those maps and or document the difficulty you have in finding them, if it's not possible to provide them to the committee, I'd really appreciate it. Have you got access to any part of the HFC cable networks operated by either player for the purposes of trials or
Not at this point.
Not at this
point. Senator.
Seriously. So how far have you been able to progress? Your revised corporate plan says 20% of the final network will be under the HFC footprint. And you haven't even opened the box. You don't have access to any of that gear yet.
Senator, can the source of the 20%, please?
27% is on page 13 of your revised corporate plan.
The current corporate?
Of the current corporate plans?
No, end of rollout percent of total 27%. Fibre to the premises 25, fibre to the node 29, HFC 27. It's a really, really big piece of your pie chart, and you don't have access to any of that gear yet.
We don't have access to the network at this stage.
Okay. When do you expect to start commercial operations over those networks?
Well, Senator, that depends upon the timing, clearly, of the negotiations with the owners of those assets.
All right.
And also various regulatory clearances that will be needed post those.
Do you want to just describe, because I don't know that we've gone into this in much detail in the past, just describe what those regulatory arrangements are going to have to look like? Are you negotiating, first of all, to purchase those assets from Telstra and Optus, lease them, or some other kind of arrangement?
Senator, I'm sorry, but those negotiations are still ongoing, and we're not in a position to comment on that.
It can't be a complete black box a year in. That's insane. I mean, without going into details about pricing or specifics, you must be able to give us some outlines.
Well, I'm sorry, Senator, whilst those negotiations are still pending, we're not in a position to comment.
Are you anticipating that you close those negotiations out this year?
We would be hopeful that we can close those negotiations out this year, yes, as Mr. Morrow has been on the record of saying at our first quarter results. But then post that, clearly there is various regulatory clearances that need to be obtained.
All right, just describe for us what they are. I think I preempted your answer to that question before.
Well, obviously the ACCC regulatory body will want to look at the agreement, Senator, and clear them.
do you want to just tell us what the final shape is likely to look like in terms of what the ACCC will provide you with, what they're going to be looking for?
The ACCC will review the agreements when they're done, and they will review them for competition policy, and they will give what the form of the clearance is, I don't know, but they'll give us presumably a letter of some sort.
I'm presuming you can confirm that you are in negotiations to gain access to both networks, not just Telstra's.
Yes, Senator.
Yeah. And is it still anticipated that NBN Co will either you're taking control of those networks either on the basis of a lease or you're taking ownership of those networks, that you will be providing, that you will be the sole wholesale operator of those assets, and then you'll be providing open access to retail players over those networks?
That's correct, Senator. That's
still correct, okay. Are you proposing to integrate the network infrastructure of the two separate networks?
Mr. Adcock.
Sorry, I was just reading an email. My apologies, Senator.
That's okay. Are you proposing to integrate the network infrastructure and the back office stuff of those two separate networks?
Yes.
You are, okay. Who will operate the operational and the business support systems that will underpin those networks? Are you going to have to rebuild those from scratch?
That's still one of the considerations that are part of the negotiations at the moment.
Okay, we don't know yet. And can you just, from a really basic technical point of view, what is involved in terms of physical technology to be installed in converting an HFC network designed to deliver television one way into the kind of product that you will need to offer RSPs?
Part of the RFI that's in the market at the moment is working with the vendor community to get a firm understanding of the advances that have been made since the deployment of both the networks and what will be required in both the head-end equipment and the external plant to make that transition. And as I understand the feedback I've got in the summary is that the early results are very positive. And both the current asset owners are looking at what they need to do to the networks to enable that as well.
Okay, but I'm no clearer as to what it looks like, and I gather it's a fast-moving field of technology and so on. But what actually needs to be installed to convert it from a network to deliver pay TV to a network to deliver two-way broadband services? What do you have to physically install?
Look, Senator, without diving deep into the technical detail, because as the Senator said, we will take that on notice, but the basic premise is that there is CMTS equipment that needs to be upgraded in the exchange.
Just go easy on the acronyms.
Cable, modem, termination systems, the head-end equipment need to be installed in the exchanges, and then there is DOCSIS 3 allows open access to.
And what gets installed at the customer end?
That would be in most cases, a new gateway.
Okay. So it's still quite a labour-intensive process. It's not just that you buy those networks and switch them on and away you go. You've got to upgrade the exchanges and you've got to upgrade each one of the customers.
Path, yes.
Yep.
I think fair to comment on the labour. The big benefit is that the lead-ins that are there
are already there.
Do not have to be rerun.
Yep. So it's some kind of terminated device at the household end, and it's exchange upgrades at that end.
I also understand, and I'm happy to be corrected, but some of the in-customer premise equipment that is deployed under the network elements that have been upgraded will also usable, not need to be replaced.
Well, what proportion of the customer base, the HFC networks, have that?
That's part of the data we're assessing at the moment. I couldn't put a figure on it, Senator.
Okay, but not zero?
Not zero.
Some of it's already in there. When we were looking at the fibre to the premise rollout, you'd be installing devices at the customer end that had 4 ports, that you could potentially have 4 different retail service providers delivering different kinds of services into the home. If I'm plugged into the HFC network against my will, but if that is what is going to be delivered, will that same kind of terminator device at the household end be in place, or will I only be able to receive one service from one RSP?
It's one service.
That's a shame, isn't it? So that's kind of a structural disadvantage for people inside that footprint.
Well, we've seen already on our FTTP network with the number of active customers that the take-up of multiple service providers is very, very low. It's in, like 102%, 103% of active premises is the number of services in operation. So it does show that there's
I didn't understand that at all, sorry. What?
So if you look
under 1%?
If you look at the number of active premises and then look at the number of active services, it's almost aligned one-to-one, so it does suggest that even though they can, even in an FTTP world, get multiple service providers on one NTD, end users really don't have that need.
Not yet, okay. Is it possible then, imagining that you get your way and the HFC rollout, you somehow get access to those networks, you incorporate it into NBN Co's back office systems and you light it all up, what's the upgrade path to full fibre to the premises in the future? Because we've dwelled a fair bit in past hearings on how you go from fibre to the node, you rip the nodes up, you connect the households to the exchange, and it's ugly, but there is an upgrade path there and other countries have done it. But what's the upgrade path for an HFC network to a full fibre to the premises network?
Without delving into the detail at this point in time, I don't understand that you can actually upgrade the network to full fibre to the premise.
That's my understanding too. But just to be clear, what that actually would look like in practice is dismantling and decommissioning the HFC cable and just running fibre all the way to the premise. You'd have to basically overbuild it. There'd be no elements of those networks that you'd be able to hold on to.
I believe there are fibre access points out there, but I can confirm that, and if you'd like, we can take it on notice and come back and confirm whether there is or is not an upgrade path.
You might need to speak a tiny bit louder, if you could. Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. I just want to be really clear here. Is there anywhere in the world you could point to where anybody's taken an HFC network and upgraded it to a full fibre to the premise network, or do you just dismantle it and start again?
I could not point to anywhere in the world, but that might be a gap in knowledge.
It would certainly be a gap in mine.
And mine.
Yeah. Okay. My understanding is you just simply need to decommission it and start from scratch. So maybe by the next time we're together, which I guess will be early in the new year, you are expecting to have agreements signed. There may be undertakings made to the ACCC, and so we will know a little bit more about how this is going to work, if at all. About a year ago, NBN Co bought IONet's Transact Fibre to the Premises network, just changing the subject briefly. Is that network now open to wholesale access?
I believe in the main it is. There might be some lagging, but in the main, Senator, I believe it is.
I would have thought that was either a kind of a yes or a no. What's the ambiguity?
Well, it was being. My understanding is it was being moved over to open access on a region by region basis.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
So in the main, yes, but there's some areas still being moved over.
Still doing that. Okay. I want to ask you then about fibre to the node customers extending fibre on demand all the way to the premise. This is one of the saddest things about what you guys are being forced to do, is that we've taken a network that would have been universal access and now are extending it to people who can afford to pay for it. Just tell us how that element of the plan is developing, and if I'm inside the HFC footprint and the product that I'll be receiving from NBN Co by way of a retailer is going to be delivered over HFC, will there be any fibre on demand product that I can buy, or will that be off the market?
So we're currently working through what I would call our fibre on demand offerings, both what that means from a single dwelling or an area or an MDU. The first area, the first capability we're looking at is more what we would refer to as an area switch. So this might be where for commercial reasons or whatever reasons that the interested parties may want, they might be able to co-contribute for that upgrade. The fibre on demand product as a commercial capability we're working through, and we have not finalised that offering at this point.
Will there be a specific retail offering and a commercial offering? Like if I'm a householder with particularly high bandwidth requirements, will that be different to a product that I could get if I'm a small business?
Not really. It'd be the same thing. But if you wanted to, for example, upgrade more than a single premise or a single dwelling or a multi-dwelling and have multiple, that's what we would refer to as an area-type switch.
Yeah. Okay. So you're anticipating still that those two things will be possible, whether I'm inside the HFC footprint or not, if I'm kind of anywhere in the country, and just the price will vary?
I mean, clearly, depending on the architecture, that doing a fibre-on-demand upgrade to a single dwelling unit may be more difficult. But also, I would argue, the HFC and DOCSIS 3.1 speeds that are coming down when you start talking 100 and 200 and 300 megabits, we'd have to start looking at, rather than looking at the technology, look at the service that's required. So I think that the debate is not about the technology on demand, it's the service on demand that's being requested. So if you're getting 100, 200 or 300 megabits over the HFC, an upgraded HFC with DOCSIS capability, then it's probably unlikely that most residents are going to a residential customer is going to need that type of upgrade.
Okay, I accept that. It's more likely that people stranded in the fibre to the node footprint are going to be the ones requesting fibre to the premise.
It could be. I mean, it all depends. Right now, if you look at where the data downloads and the usage trends, there's still ongoing technology advancements in FTTN with services like GFast and ongoing improvements in fibre to the distribution points, which makes that distance that you're using the last piece of copper shorter and shorter. So,
You've actually got to put fibre further into the suburbs to achieve those speeds. So there is an extra cost. When people just talk about GFast,
there is.
It's implied by some people who try and do this that you don't do anything else, it's like switching out the cards, but it's actually not. There's a construction involved in going deeper into pits outside homes, usually, just because that's where there's already holes.
I totally accept. All those technologies work over shorter distances, so you need to get fibre to the most economic point and then to deploy that last piece. Yep.
What's the maximum length of last mile copper that you could have somebody hanging off then to deliver that kind of service?
In some of these new technologies, for their effectiveness, you're really talking sub 100 metres.
Okay, so that
might go to 200 metres.
That's down the end of the street.
Yeah.
You might as well just cable them all the way up. And so it was a statement, not a question. I'll move on. So there's no. I take it there's no. There were early lazy estimates that it would be $5,000 a premise floating around for fibre on demand. I don't know where they came from, but is that in the ballpark?
So we haven't. I can't comment on it. I don't know where that estimate came from, and we've finalised that.
You guys have had well over a year. When are you likely to be able to announce some kind of product or offering?
First capability we should be announcing by the end of this calendar year, which will be area switch or MDU type upgrades, and then the fibre on demand single dwelling will be early in the following quarter.
Okay. This one, I've got a couple that might more properly rest with you, Minister. They're likely to be more political decisions than sort of stuff that we've been discussing so far around engineering. It's been reported that there are clauses in the Trans-Pacific Partnership that's under negotiation at the moment relating to state-owned enterprises. I don't know whether you're a party to that agreement, Senator Fifield. I suspect maybe you're not. But I'm very interested to know where NBN Co stands in terms of government policy. There's apparently a list where governments that are signatories or proposed signatories to this agreement can quarantine state-owned enterprises and say we want NBN Co to be exempt from whatever clauses might apply under the TPP. Can you maybe confirm for us, firstly, whether that list exists, and if it does, whether you've placed NBN Co on it?
Senator, I don't have any knowledge in relation to that area. I think, as I indicated to you when you asked me a similar question
I asked about the ABC.
In relation to ABC and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that obviously Minister Rob and the Trade Portfolio are the lead on negotiations in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So I think probably the best I can do is take that on notice and if parts of it do need to be referred to the trade portfolio, which I suspect they will, then we can ensure that happens.
All right. You're clear what I'm after specifically is where NBN Co sits
Sure.
Relative to this list, which is alleged. I mean, nobody's seen the text. I haven't. I suspect you may not have either. But it's being preceded by leaks that it does exist and it would have a substantial and material impact on NBN Co if that's the case, if it's on or off that quarantine list. So I want to, again, this question might go to government policy. Senator Fifield, can you outline for us the government's policy on the breakup or the sale, the privatisation, the part privatisation? What is the structure? What's this government's policy on the eventual structure of NBN Co?
Look, Senator, I think it's best in relation to that if I refer that to Minister Turnbull. As you'd appreciate, as the Minister representing the Minister for Communications, I don't necessarily propose to speak on behalf of the Minister on policy matters where it might be most appropriate that I refer a question to him.
The two areas that I'm most interested in is how on earth you would, this is coming from the ACCC quite recently, how NBN Co would accommodate competition at the wholesale layer. We have been through these debates at length over the last 6 years and eventually rested on a model where the market would let rip at the retail layer, but at the wholesale layer, NBN Co would be the provider of last resort, if you like, providing universal access. So firstly, is it government policy that there should be some kind of competition at the wholesale layer where alternate HFC networks or wireless networks or God knows what would be competing for retail custom? Is that government policy?
Again, Senator, I'll take that on notice for Minister Turnbull.
Yeah. If it is government policy, I'd just be keen for any kind of illustration as to how on earth that would work. And the second element of the question is if NBN Co is broken up, which its Act forbids at the moment, but if it was, and for example the satellite business was spooled off as a separate entity, how much in the final network architecture where satellite represents, I think, 3% of your end of rollout total customer base, how much of a loss-making enterprise would that satellite business be if you spun it out into its own show?
I think there's multiple hypothetical questions.
That's not hypothetical. How much money would that entity lose?
There were some hypothetical questions in your submission.
I'll get really specific then. At the end of the rollout, when the satellite business is serving 3% of the customers right out in rural and remote Australia, how much money would that entity lose every year? Just because obviously being cross-subsidised by the other parts of the network. Anybody who wants to take that one's welcome.
I'll take it on notice. It would not be appropriate to try and estimate here.
Okay. Can you confirm for me that it would not, as a standalone entity, be a profit-generating business? There is zero possibility.
Certainly under the current pricing instructions, yes, it would be loss-making, Senator.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you wouldn't be willing to hazard a guess as to how much?
Oh, Senator, you've asked a question as to in the distant future what it would lose.
It's not that distant. It's not that distant.
Sorry, I thought that's what you asked. What was your question?
And by the end of the rollout, how much money would the satellite business lose if it was spun out as its own entity?
Senator, I don't have that detail here, and that would require some analysis.
Okay.
Senator Ludlam, I do hope you're not suggesting that we don't subsidise rural and regional users.
I'm actually very, very worried that that's what you're suggesting. Yeah. If you spin this entity out by itself, somebody's going to have to pay for it. That's precisely what I'm worried about.
Okay, well, I'm very happy that you're sitting on a looking after our rural and regional consumers and customers.
I think somebody may need to. Yeah.
Check the record.
Tell us about the wireless business, the whole idea of this universal open access network is that the big cities subsidise the bush. It's how post operates, it's how electricity and water and gas operate, and I think it's how telecommunications should operate. That's the principle on which the network was set up. If some of the ideologues who are circling this network have their way and spool these entities off to separate businesses, someone's going to have to pay for them. With the fixed wireless business serving 5% again of sort of rural and regional areas, if that was spun out to its own entity, would that be a loss-making enterprise?
Again, Senator, I don't have the details here. I'm just looking in the fixed wireless and satellite review. If you would give me some time, I may be able to find some financials in the review.
This is really my last question as to how on earth it's going to operate if it is broken up. So I'm happy to throw back to other senators while Mr Roux checks those figures, if you like.
Okay, well, while we're waiting to do that, and before we go back to Senator Conroy, so we don't break his role, earlier on when you were asking some questions, Senator Conroy asked some questions in relation to the Milton 10 trial.
So, Mr. Bettering, could I finish my questions if you want to go back to Milton 10? I don't mind you asking questions. That's just you finished in the middle of my questions. I'm happy for other questions.
Specifically about the questions you've already asked. They're actually follow-up questions, but given that I'm the chair, I'll used to do it as I please.
I was having to follow up my own questions.
Well, you can follow up my questions as well. You made some comments about the increase or the percentage of faster rollout, the percentage of more cheaply. So the sites. No, you did.
No questions about those issues at all.
Okay. I was just wondering, against what sites did you measure these so-called achievements?
The original leaked unapproved review had run a comparison against an average across a particular region. As part of the peer review, what the team did was looked at 4 like FSAMs still in Victoria but with similar attributes to provide a baseline from which comparisons could or should be made.
Okay, so am I right in assuming what you just said, that the Milton 10 trial was not necessarily typical of the broader NBN rollout, and yet that was what it was measured against?
Milton 10 as an FSAM had attributes that were not typical of the broader rollout, correct. I'm happy to step through the findings.
I'm sure we were going to get to them.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just wondering, and while Mr Roux still looking, that were the resources that were allocated to the Milton 10 project typical of the kind of resources that you would allocate under a normal rollout?
One of the challenges that the team had in doing the peer review was actually getting to baseline data of the amount of resources that were deployed in the Milton. I think the original article pointed out, and I think, Senator, you reiterated in your earlier question, that there were 3 or 4 subcontract firms doing one FSAM. That is not typical. That is not at all typical. In fact, that was...
Also not true, but we'll get to that.
Okay. That was in there.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go back to Mr Roux because obviously Senator Conroy will ask you about the differences as well as the and where the peer review deviated from the findings of the original leaked document. But did you find Mr Roux?
Yes.
Okay, Senator Latham.
Senator,
Mr Roux's got your...
If I can just I'm sorry. If I could just refer you to page 13 of the Fixed Wireless and Satellite Review final report, May 2014.
It may surprise you to know that I don't have that in front of me, so I'll take your word for it.
No, that's okay. That's why I read it out.
Go ahead.
If you look at, there's a table there which is called Exhibit 1.1, Financial Outcomes. It talks about the combined satellite and fixed wireless, so I don't have the split that you mentioned. It talks about in steady state that revenues would be between 240 and 310 million. Annual operating expenditure would be 200, and I'm sorry, my copy's a bit blurred, but I think it says 250 million. But capital expenditure, again, annual, would be 280 to 290 million.
Okay.
So when you look at that, that will tell you the indicative cash flow on an annual basis.
So nobody in their right mind is going to buy that business? you'd have to offer them some very, very strange guarantees for that to be a saleable entity. Could you pass that back to some of the people who are proposing to spool off these entities as separate businesses? That'd be great. Thanks for finding those figures for us, though. If it's possible to disaggregate the two, if somebody somewhere must have aggregated those numbers up.
Again, it's before my time, so I don't know off the top of my head. So
yeah, if it's possible to provide us on notice with the disaggregated figures for each of the two, because they'll be substantially different.
I'll have a look at that.
Yeah, thanks. Much appreciated. Thanks, Chair.
Senator Conroy.
Thank you. Now, we were just discussing some aspects of Milton, not actually the aspects that the Chair was asking you questions about, but so we've just been talking about the RFS was reached on 23rd July as per the Telstra wholesale rollout schedule, and we agreed that we're not contesting that aspect of it. So Milton 10 was completed to RFS at 90% S, what you call Service Class 1, I think, or Service Class 2 on 23rd July, which is Service Class 1. Is that the fair characterisation, or 2? I'm just wanting to make sure I get it right.
Service Class 2.
Service Class 2. So quite a bit of the information in the Milton 10 leaked paper you've now confirmed.
Yeah.
Now, the Milton 10 presentation states that construction began in Milton 10 on the 28th of February. In another answer to a question on notice, you confirm this but say that, and I quote, NBN Co issued 2 instructions for work to commence at Milton. The first was 9 January.
Yeah.
This was on day rates, as we had not at this stage agreed the scope of work. And the second was on the 28th of February on an agreed schedule of rates of work. That's from one of your answers. So I'm just interested why there was a contract instruction issued to Milton 9 for Milton on 9 January if you'd not already agreed a schedule of work. So I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, I understand.
Trying to understand that answer.
Yeah, no, that's so did I. I understand that there were works started, what they call on day rates, while they were finalising the contract, and that work was to start doing. I understand it to be the transit work in and around the FSAM. Yeah.
The transit.
So they start the work going,
work.
and they start the work, pay people on day rates while the final scheduled rates and contract instrument gets finalised, and then they release the contract.
Okay. So just so we're clear, take me through again the sort of bits that make up the rollout. There's a transit network.
The distribution network.
Yeah. There's a distribution network.
Yeah.
Now, what would you, for an uninformed person, what are you defining as a distribution network? Is that from the front gate to a home? Is that from a fan to the front gate? From the fan to the... Walk us through this.
So you clearly need to get from a fibre access point to the fan, from the fan to the FSAM, and then the FSAM runs around. You have a network coming from the fibre distribution hub and going around the area. That would be the distribution network.
So when you said transit before, transit is which part of that?
I'd say the distribution network, my bad.
So you're saying it wasn't the transit network that they were working on from February 9? January 9?
No, it was I understand it to be the distribution network, Senator.
Sorry?
The distribution network, Senator.
Distribution network. So transit was just... There was no part of the transit. I'm only asking because you said transit, so I just want to be very clear.
I correct myself.
Very clear. There was no part of the transit network. It was purely the distribution network,
Correct.
Which is from
the fibre access point into the fibre serving area. From the fibre serving area into the fibre access point.
And what are we defining as a fibre access point for the purposes of this discussion? Is that the box inside the house? Is that the box on the wall?
Oh, no, back the other way. You'd be back towards the exchange. It might be a point of interconnect.
So it's not the connection from the home,
it's nowhere near the home. It's not to the home, no.
Okay. So the Milton 10 presentation says that Telstra remediation works commenced in January 14.
They did.
That's correct?
That's correct.
Now the second contract instruction was issued on 28th of February on an agreed schedule of rates. So is this the date the construction commenced proper in Milton 10? Well, explain to me, which part of the colouring of your map, to give you a simple way of trying to describe it. Does the remediation work being done by Telstra, the distribution network, which isn't the premise?
So Senator, the build preparation trigger is the commencement notice to Telstra. Invariably, when we let a contract to a party to build an FSAM, it includes the distribution network and then the network, the multi-ports and everything that goes with that, and that would be the contract instruction. Now, my understanding is in Melton, some of that was done on day rates prior to the actual contract instruction being executed. I need to correct one thing, because I think going backwards and forwards, just looking at my notes here on the trial, I have the contract being executed on the 9th of February, not the 28th, and I believe we have answered the 28th, so I will get that corrected for you, Senator.
Sorry, so...
Was the 28th in the original, was the 28th the date in the original?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, okay. I believe it to be the 9th.
And I know at the time, I accept at the time you were unsure. I was unsure. You couldn't absolutely confirm, however...
So I think that's the answer. I think the 28th is now the 9th following the peer review.
So peer review has backdated it to the 9th. So
the peer review hasn't backdated it, Senator. The peer review has identified the date as the 9th.
So what happened on the February the 9th?
I believe that to be the date the contract was executed to after the schedule of rates had been agreed.
So executed. I'm just looking. So, but you think you inadvertently advised the committee of the 28th, or?
No, I understand if my memory is
right. Working off
right.
The original document.
The original document said the 28th. I said I was unsure.
Yeah, I was indicating my memory was that you were unsure and didn't want to confirm the 28th. You thought it was earlier from your vague memory of it, but you can now confirm that you believe that the scheduler rates was agreed on the 9th
The contract instruction that normally triggers the colour change in the maps to build commence was the 9th of February 2014.
Right. So not when the scheduler rates were signed?
The same day.
Okay, so you're saying that in your mind, for the working purposes of NBN code, the scheduler rates being agreed was the commencement?
Oh, yeah. That was the commencement of the contract. There was works done beforehand on the distribution network on day rates.
Yep. Okay. Right. So the time it took to complete, even if it's not the 28th of February, if it's the 9th of February, that's a longer date. It's still a faster rate than was being achieved, substantially faster than other areas.
It has been proven out even against the 4 FSAMs to be a very fast rollout.
Yep.
And that was
I think
I'm happy
it's
to
unarguable.
Yeah.
We'll come back. I'm sure you want to give us some information, but we'll get there when I finish my questions.
Absolutely.
Now, the corporate plan released this week says that NBN Co intends to implement many of the construction improvements that were trialled in Milton 10.
Correct. Or already has.
Well, again, I'm pleased to hear you say that. So the corporate plan states on page 16, in addition, starting in 2015 and on a continuing basis, NBN Co plans to continue to make changes to the construction delivery model, including continued simplification and standardisation of the deployment process with clear design rules, standardised specifications and processes, an industry standard design environment and a relevant construction methodology and operating manual for constructors on the ground. That's just straight out of there. NBN Co is currently working through the potential implementation of redesigned FTTP models as outlined in the strategic reviews. I'm interested in what you mean by the strategic reviews. Is that the option 2 or whatever it's referred to? What is referred to as... So are you radically redesigning, is my question. Is that what you're adopting those things?
We're adopting the things that prove out in that document, yes, Senator.
Yeah, you prove them out if you actually
trial them and validate.
You can prove them out and validate them. If you don't actually trial them, you can't prove them out by definition. So currently the main potential elements of the redesign are architecture and materials, including reducing the number of allocated fibres per premise, increased use of aerial deployment, removal of passive optical network protection, using smaller diameter fibre cables, use of gel-free cables and optional battery backup for the network termination device, where the end user must provide their informed consent in order to opt out, and construction techniques, including equipment for testing duct congestion, aerial extension methods, and alternative customer drop implementation techniques, optimising fibre testing at multi-port and usage of direct bury cable. So they're all of the things that you are implementing now during the course of your 2015 build.
Yes.
So would they be productivity improvements?
Efficiencies and productivity improvements.
Yeah. But according to the strategic review undertaken by Mr Rousselot, he forecast no productivity improvements. Well, that's not fair. He forecasted a tiny productivity improvement in 1 year, FY, I think, 18. That's what it says. I mean, you can read it yourself.
Yeah, I would suggest we go back to the definition of productivity. I'm sure Mr Rousselot, I've been in this industry for a number of years, and yourself, Senator, you've checked in. People refer to technology changes as productivity. I think, and I can't speak on behalf of the authors of the strategic review, but I think they were referring to productivity as direct reduction in rates.
Mr Morrow says it's your strategic review.
Sorry, it's ours. It's NBN's.
So you are speaking on behalf of Mr Rousselot's review, even though you know it was a dog and you don't want to acknowledge it.
I don't know. Speaking on behalf of having read the strategic review, my understanding that the term productivity in that context meant labour efficiencies due to improved methodologies in the rollout, as opposed to technological advances and rollout efficiencies, as we found with the small form multiport.
Yeah. No, so I'm accepting that all of those things represent efficiencies and productivity improvements, and I don't think you can really argue that. No. The problem is that Mr Rousselot's strategic review claimed that they
strategic review.
You got me there, Mr Adcock. That the NBN strategic review forecast that none of this was possible.
I don't know. I don't know that it forecast that none of it was possible.
It actually said there'd be no productivity improvements except it's in a table, FY18.
Again, my understanding is that my understanding of our review was that productivity in that instance was referring to labour reductions with the Tier 1 delivery partners.
I think you're now... Okay. I don't hesitate to say you're verballing Mr Rousselot, but I think you're going close. But anyway, I just wanted to move on. Okay. So just to confirm, the language here looks like it has been changed to make this all appear new. Let me be very clear about this. I'm quite cynical about the way you've described these things. But equipment for testing duct congestion sounds like the change to the mandrel size that Mr
That would be the mandrel size,
said the company implemented last year. That's right, you've just acknowledged that. Alternative customer drop implementation techniques. Does that include build drops?
Yes, and bulk drops.
Yep, both of which were implemented and announced and on the way.
Announced as you corrected me before, Senator, some time ago. Again, just getting the commercial instruments in place and validating how it would be done in a number of areas.
So, Mr Adcock, it's probably before your time, but as you probably had to come to some understanding of it, you're familiar with version 13 of the NBN corporate plan?
No, Senator, I'm not.
Okay, it was in... NBN Co commented on it yesterday, so I was hoping you might know something about it. It was submitted to the board on 19th of September 2013.
And was that a board-endorsed document, Senator?
No, it's not what I said. I said it was submitted to the board. The board was then
sorry,
the board was then sacked on the day. So
I'm sorry for asking you a question,
yeah.
but
no, that's
I'm
all
not
right.
familiar with the document.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
no, I was hoping you might have had it drawn to your attention, given NBN Co commented on it yesterday.
It hasn't been drawn to my attention, no.
Okay.
I don't know the document at all.
Version 13 demonstrated on page 59 that many of the changes listed in the strategic review and your corporate plan under the heading radically redesigned FTTP are actually now incorporated in your corporate plan submitted to the board last September. Are you aware of that?
No, Senator, I'm not.
So all those things I've just read out from your corporate plan were part of a corporate plan that was submitted by management to the board meeting on the, as I said, the 19th of September last year.
Right.
So I just want to know if you were aware of that.
I'm not aware, Senator. I assume it wasn't endorsed by the board, which is...
Well, the board was
presumably
sacked that day, so it's hard for the board to
Okay.
endorse it. But the point being, many of the things that you've adopted now and incorporated in your corporate plan were part of a plan that was put to the board back on September the 19th last year. And we have Mr McLaren on the Hansard record, well, he worked for NBN Co, setting out that most of these changes were what he described as incremental and were already being implemented by the company. Mr Quigley said publicly that they were business as usual changes. The September 2013, what we call version 13, corporate plan shows that they had already been accepted by management as part of the rollout model. You've now adopted them formally within your document, but your strategic review described many of these as a radical redesign. So are you adopting radical redesigns, Mr Adcock? I've never taken you as flamboyant. And that's not being pejorative in any way. These aren't radical, these are common sense changes as they're proved out.
And Senator, as you know, part of why we got here was taking the time to prove them out and make sure that they would deliver the benefits claimed. Some have, some haven't.
Now, just going back, I just want to confirm 9th of February, that's the date you have.
9th of February is the date I have.
Yeah, it's a Sunday. Working hard that day?
I have the date in front of me, the 9th of February, sir.
We've got the team.
We work hard.
Team working on Sundays, Mr Rue. That is
not unusual, Senator, not unusual in NBN.
Very tough. That is very tough. And that was before you arrived. I mean, God, help them now.
I can confirm, Senator, that the 9th of February was a Sunday.
Yes. So that would amount to 108 working days to complete. 108
that's
working
the
days.
math.
That's the math, yes. Okay, so putting aside for the moment the changes that were introduced by the previous management, and we have Gary McLaren, the former Chief Technology Officer of NBN Co, on the Hansard record, setting out that most of these changes were incremental and were already being implemented by the company. Why would NBN Co be planning to implement on a national scale the improvements trialled in Milton 10 if Milton 10 did not produce the positive results that are set out in the presentation? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You want to bag Milton 10 as wrong.
No, I don't think anyone ever set out to bag Milton 10. The peer review...
But you're actually adopting the things that NBN Co was already putting in place, which is good.
Yeah.
And you should be congratulated for this.
I think the Milton initiative was very good in validating a number of the assumptions and assertions made by Gary's CTO office.
And I'm just trying to remember the phrase that was used. Desktop. And the word desktop calculation. I think Mr Rousselot arrogantly dismissed some of these things when we're discussing the strategic review as they were just desktop designs. So what's a desktop design?
You have caught me before, Senator, on putting words into Mr Rousselot's mouth.
No,
I'd rather not do it
always
again.
unwise. You're right to be cautious.
Thank you.
You're right to be cautious about anything Mr Rousselot says on or off the record. He said the savings were not included because there was no business case. but you've been able to...
Sorry, Senator.
and that's a Hansard quote as opposed to my vague recollections.
Yeah,
I'll stand by my vague recollections being relatively accurate because I'm sure there are other things that he said.
But and my vague recollection is that it was not all savings. There were a percentage, I think you called it out yourself just a minute ago, in the scenario 2, where there were savings picked up due to a number of initiatives. They weren't all shelved.
No, I'm just trying to ascertain which of them, and it looks like most of them have been picked up, which is sensible.
I think the fact that the Milton 10 trial initiative utilised the small form multi-port and the small diameter cable was a product of the fact of timing. As the reviewers found out, there were, and I think we responded in a question on notice, there were already 64 FSAMs designed using the small diameter cable at the time of Milton, so that had produced that. Those designs were being produced since January. That subsequently has been updated to 69, I understand. And the use of the small form multi-port had been designed into some 85 FSAMs at the time of the Milton trial. So I don't, where benefits and efficiencies were clear to the business that could be delivered, they were designed into the sort of into the rollout, as Mr. McLaren said.
The problem here is you've got a conundrum. You've actually proved up most of. In fact, I can't find any you've dumped, but you might be able to, and I'm happy to have a discussion about them if you've got them. You've actually proved up most of what Mr. McLaren said. You've proved up most of what Mr. Ferris forecast in his desktop designs. And that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a very good thing.
But your problem is that Mr. Rousselot dumped them into scenario 2, calling them all radically redesigned, and so that allowed him to use the 2012-15 corporate plan as his baseline to justify the numbers. So, in other words, he didn't use version 13, and all the things you've now proved that version 13, and you've sensibly proved them, Mr. Adcock. You've proved that they actually were real, but Mr. Rousselot dumped them into option 2, referring to it as radically redesigned. And then if you go back and look at the radically redesigned option 2 and the numbers on it, I think it was 34 billion was the costings. But you've made a decision, not you, the board made a decision to recommend a build based on what was option 1, which dismissed the savings, and once they dismissed them into option 2. So your problem is that your strategic review bases your decisions and all the publicity. This is not you, Mr. Radcliffe.
No.
All based on option 1. But option 2, you've made option 2 real.
But Senator, if I could make 2 observations. The comment that the strategic review baseline was the last corporate plan endorsed by the board, I think is appropriate at the time given the strategic review. I wasn't there, but I think that's the appropriate place to start. And in rolling forward, as you say, we've attempted to take the good work that had been done and validate the sort of assertions made by the Technology Office, which have proven out. But in any case, as I look at the results and where we're adopting them, the cost with those savings included for fibre to the premise still far exceeds the cost of a multi-technology mix. I mean, they're facts.
Could you just say it again?
When we take so if I go back to the first point, the baseline scenario in the strategic review was calculated off the last approved corporate plan.
Yes, that's the very point.
That's my point, yeah. So the scenario 2, which was labelled radically redesigned.
By you, given you're speaking on behalf of
NBN. By us, NBN. Sort of took on board what they believed to be the savings that would prove out, and we then attempted, as good practice in business, to prove out the recommendations of the Chief Technology Officer, Gary McLaren, who, by his own nature, was an intelligent man, and his team put these out. Where they've proven out they've been adopted, but even in adopting them, we're finding the cost per premise, with all those efficiencies built in, is still far exceeding the modelling we're finding on doing the multi-technology mix.
Well,
I think that's.
I think you were going to prepare some figures on that. I don't know that they've arrived yet, but Mr. Rue indicated at the last hearing that we'd be preparing them, so maybe they'll be available by our December hearing of the other committee. So look forward to having a lengthy discussion about how you include OPEX on one-off basis into a rollout figure.
Just for the record, there's no inclusion of OPEX.
Okay. Now, I wanted to just be clear, the single biggest saving from the radical redesign of reducing the number of fibres, which is what you've now recommended doing, saved, I think, $2 to $3 billion just by reducing the number of fibres per premise. That's correct.
That was the assertion. That one
you're
at this point in
implementing
time. No. If I may, the utilisation of less than 3 fibres per premise has been in the planning rules for quite some time, Senator. I think I put that on the record last time. Where there is a high growth FCM, the planning rules remained 3 fibres per premise. Milton itself, given its demographics, was planned as a high growth area and was run out at 3 fibres per premise.
So, according to the board papers, version 13, $3.3 billion savings by implementing the lesser. And I'm not going to get an argument now, but I will later about the way you describe, there was options before. I think that's a bit of a smokescreen you're putting up, Mr. Adcock, but I'm not going to fight with you about that today. $3.3 billion in savings by adopting the lesser fibre, and now you're doing that, which is absolutely gold star for you. But do you concede it's around $3.3 billion?
No, I do not.
From reducing from...
No, I do not concede that.
So do you have
from my recollection, that may have been what Mr. Rousselot was referring to as a desktop exercise, and something that needed to be proven out. From
what is
my
the savings,
understanding,
Mr. Rue, what's the savings from your own current corporate plan by adopting these proposals? Or is that commercial in confidence? You can't tell us how much money you've saved.
Senator, the corporate plan hasn't been based on, as I said earlier, the 2015 budget, as I call it, or corporate plan, has been based upon a bottom-up analysis of rollout and relevant costs. So I can't tell you the savings, hypothetically, if we used a different...
You can't tell us the savings if you hadn't incorporated a reduction in the number of fibres per home.
Well, we have included...
I find that an extraordinary statement from the Chief Financial Officer.
We have included in the costings what we are currently utilising in the rollout. That's all I said.
Can I also suggest that the savings in that paper were calculated off a full fibre rollout?
The full 93%, right. No argument about that, but proportionately, there's still a significant saving. But this is an argument about the costings of the radical redesign, and we're trying to understand what savings you're making on whatever proportion is now fibre to the premise. But it doesn't invalidate that there's $3.3 billion of savings across a 93% rollout.
If you assert that you would roll out a 93% fibre to the premise network...
That's a figure entirely about the 93%.
And I think that's the figure, Senator, that was based on the desktop exercise of 4 FSAMs, and that's why I think there was some doubt as to whether it should be included in its full extent.
I've now asked you to tell us what that calculation would be. Now, you may say, well, we haven't done that calculation for 93%, but you've certainly done it for the... Senator Ludlam, did you say 25% fibre to the premise costings? Or fibre to the premise is part of the new corporate plan? Was that the figure you quoted before? So you must know 25. What the level of saving is per premise or across the rollout for 25% premises.
Again, Senator, without wanting to sort of play on semantics. You know, in a lot of the new development work where we're doing fibre, because they are high growth, they were running at 1.5 anyway. So was that built into the numbers or not? I haven't gone back and reviewed the papers pre-September or pre-November.
Yeah, no, but I'm just going on.
I think
I'm just going on material that's been published by Ms. Chrysler on your own website, where she said that better savings has already been made in other FSAMs.
Absolutely,
and that's one of the reasons I'd like to have a conversation with her, because I'd like to know why she said that, and get a genuine answer from her. The fact that you continue not to bring her allows me not to ask her these questions, but she's on the public record, she's a public spokesperson, and I'd like to ask her those sort of questions, but I will move on. Okay. So, you acknowledge that there are savings to capital expenditure from these improvements that you factored into your corporate plan?
Yes, there are savings.
Okay. And they're CapEx savings?
They're network build, absolutely.
Yep. Now, you're talking about time frame. Would they make the rollout faster by implementing those things in your individual FSAMs where you're still doing fibre?
Sorry, I was just distracted from the last answer.
No, I was just asking, I'm now talking about the time frame.
Yes.
Asking, in introducing these changes in the FSAMs where you're still doing it, are you getting faster rollouts? There's no suggestion there's no faster rollout available.
No, and again, Senators, if I look at the like FSAMs, a lot of the time a lot of the driver of the time in an FSAM is around the amount of new build that needs to go on. And that's why we're in trying to be fair to everybody when we looked for comparable FSAMs. I think it's fair to say Milton is quite an outlier in the amount of new build on the sort of conservative side. In fact, I'm happy to share the sort of, I think it was under, I'll tell you exactly how much new build was involved, Senator. It was under 5 kilometres. Yeah, new build kilometres, sorry, yes, 5.3 kilometres.
So, but the question I'm asking about, I mean, you're not suggesting that with all these improvements there's no faster rollout that's been achieved?
No. The small form multi-print has improved time. The small form multi-port.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So all of those things have led to faster time, notwithstanding that Mr Rousselot and NBN Co in its strategic plan said there would be no faster rollout. The rollout couldn't get faster with improved technologies.
I'm not aware of those statements, Senator. Weren't there technical improvements captured in the scenario to improve efficiency as opposed to productivity, which, again, I go back to my assumption was reduction in labour cost as opposed to rollout efficiency. I mean, as I've said before, we're very focused on getting more and more efficient, and where we can identify efficiencies, which have been done and validated in Milton, we will adopt them.
And I mean, as I said, I'm congratulating you on proving up Mr McLaren and Mr Ferris's design proposals. Some of them were put in place.
Yep. You recall the leaked document, Senator. The 5 key areas that they were looking at in the Milton trial were a new deployment system called Render, new equipment in the field such as the small diameter cable, the small form multi-port. They were looking at new ways of faster ways or more effective ways of testing the equipment, like the intelligent optical loss measurement instruments. They were looking at the Tier 3 contracting model, which is why, I said that it was very difficult to compare timeframes because there are a number of contractors in the area, which is a departure from what we normally see. And there was a trialling the drop methodologies, and they were, I think, even in the original document, the 5 key areas that were being looked at in the Milton validation trial. Do you agree?
I'll accept that what you're saying, whether I agree entirely with the context of it, but
okay.
I'll come back to you if I've got any other questions.
Okay.
So at the last Select Committee hearing, Mr Adcock, you said, and I quote, render was contracted through Biari for Melton only. It was contracted for the trial. I believe the contract was $330,000.
I believe that's
what you said?
Correct. If that's on Hansard. I did say it was contracted through Biari.
Yep. You said it was contracted through Biari for Melton only.
Well, I mean, I'm happily to correct myself there. It was contracted through Biari for Melton, and I understand that there was an offer for a number of other FSAMs if the software proved out.
So you didn't contract Biari for 6 other FSAMs?
It wasn't 6, I believe it was 5, Senator. And
5 plus 1, giving you 6 in total.
Okay, I haven't got the detail.
But you paid for the right to use it in 6 FSAMs.
Correct, and it didn't deliver to its claimed design capability. And that was part of the issues and part of the trial. There is still significant development required on functionality.
The point being that you were quite derogatory about 330,000 being. Imagine, I think you said something like, imagine if all FSAMs had the 330,000 attached to them, implying that it was a fixed cost for the one FSAM, whereas in actual fact it was a contract signed that could cover 6 FSAMs.
Senator, if I could put it into context, you'll recall at that hearing, and again my memory is a bit fuzzy, but you asked me, I wasn't sure of the cost, and I did sort of get it through the very quick emails at the end.
Yeah,
and
there's no argument about 330,000. The argument is you tried to portray to the committee that it was only for Melton, and then you went on to opine about imagine if that was the cost of, built into all of the FSAMs, where in actual fact you contracted the company for 6 FSAMs. You may have not then gone on to use it, but you actually contracted the company for 6 FSAMs, not only, your word, Melton.
Okay. My understanding, as I sit here today, Senator, which I didn't know at the time, was that the contract with Biari was to utilise the software for up to 5, of which Melton was 1. I don't want to have an argument about 1. It may be 5 plus 1. It may be 5. The fact is it cost us $330,000. That $330,000 has been paid. The fact is that we have only used it in Melton and it did not deliver to its claimed design capability. There was still significant development required on the functionality. The PIR found that the capability that had been claimed was being augmented by people running Excel spreadsheets. Now, I'm not saying it can't be right. I know the people, Biari are a very good software company. And they've, as you've stated yourself, they've got the design awards. Tools. They were nominated for. They didn't win it. Whether that option is still open to use it on the other 5, if they've developed it further based on the experience at Melton, is an option we may very well explore. But we found it wasn't scalable. In fact, if I go to the outcome, I'm happy to say, or I'm happy to read to you what they found with the render tool itself. If the Senator will indulge me for a minute. The render deployment capability versus outcome achieved. The design capability claimed was that it would automatically create the work scope bill of quantity
just so we're clear, we're talking about render at the moment.
We're talking about render.
Cool, thank you.
Absolutely. Automatically create the work scope bill of quantity directly from the detailed design document. That was achieved. That would allocate work to contractors using a ticket of work system. That was partially achieved with the work allocated using Excel spreadsheets and no ticket of work integration. The claim was that it would automatically create the work schedule based on resources. That too was partially achieved, and the team believed with subsequent improvements to the system towards the end of the project, it started to deliver. It was claimed that it would automatically release 4 days of work to crews each day as a top-up to ensure continuity and visibility of work. Again, it was found that that was partially achieved, but the work was released using Excel spreadsheets. It was claimed that it would only release tasks when all preceding tasks had been completed. That was achieved. It was claimed that the status of the completed work updated daily based on tasks completed daily, optimally reschedule the remaining work at task level. The findings were that the status of the completed tasks were managed manually. Optimal rescheduling was achieved with some subsequent system improvements. It was claimed that it would automate variations and as-built managements. That was not achieved. All variations and as-built data was captured manually, and it was claimed that it would build the network as it was designed, eliminating air gaps. The team said found that was partially achieved. However, there were a high number of design variations, and subsequently, as we found, the defect rate encountered is higher than what you would find as an average. And so, if you wanted to summarise the findings from the render perspective, the statement is the render deployment management system did not deliver to its original design. There is still significant amount of work required on the functionality of the system. I'm sure if that work is done and the render team come back again, I would be happy to deploy it within the money we've already paid on a number of other FSAMs to test it again.
Now, I'd like to talk to you about the team internal to NBN Co who worked on Melton 10. Okay. How many were involved in the Melton 10 project who are working inside the company? So not your external contractors on the ground.
How many were involved internally? Again, that's when we ask for the review, that number is hard to ascertain.
Okay. Well, what's the name of the team? The Melton 10 presentation states that it was the Construction Services Group.
Oh, the Construction Services Group was a group at the time within the construction area.
Okay. How many staff were on this team?
I'll take that on notice.
Are all those staff still with the company?
No, they are not.
How many have departed?
I will take that on notice, Senator, and come back. I mean, the whole operations area was restructured around efficiency.
When was that?
It was commenced in March, the review, and it was progressively rolled out through till October this year.
So October?
October.
And are you aware if any of the people who worked on Melton 10 were restructured out of the company?
I'm aware that people that worked on Melton 10 are no longer with the company as part of the restructure.
Right. And when did they depart? Did they depart in the March part or the October part?
Again, I don't know the exact numbers. I know of some individuals, and I can't say I'm speaking for all of them. I understand one of the individuals was advised that the role was redundant in July. I know another one was advised in August, from memory.
And they're just the ones off the top of your off the top of your head?
Off the top of my head. Again, without going into detail. They're the ones
I wouldn't expect you to be absolutely able to answer this. So
I'm guessing these are the ones to which you're referring, and so on.
I don't know who I'm referring to,
okay.
So that's why I'm seeking information from you. I don't know the name of a single person in the Construction Services Group unless I bumped into them in my previous roles. But I'm just trying to ascertain
I'm aware of
whether Melton 10 Group still exists, whether they've been restructured out of jobs, and from the sound of it,
Senator, there are people that worked on Milton 10 that are still in the organisation.
A large number of people would have worked on Milton 10, which is why I asked you the number. But you've identified that 2 individuals have been restructured, made redundant, one in July and one in August. One in July and one in August, you said.
I believe that was when they were advised of their redundancy. I know one of them was asked to stay on and work a bit longer.
Now, I want to talk about the government's pre-election broadband policy. It had the aim of getting 25 meg to every home by 2016 and 50 meg to every home by 2019. Will NBN meet that pre-election promise? Mr. Roux?
As I said in my opening remarks, Senator, the executive team and indeed the next level down are very focused on developing a financial and operating plan, but that plan is obviously being done in the context of negotiations and regulatory approvals, Senator. So certainly that is a...
Thank you for that. The question I asked was would you meet...
If I could finish. So certainly we're conscious of those timings, Senator, and we're certainly developing
Will you
plans.
meet Mr Abbott and Mr Turnbull's stated election broadband policy and the promise that they would get 25 meg to every home by 2016?
I'm sorry, Senator.
So that's just a question. Will you meet?
Sorry, 16 you said.
2016, yes.
No, Senator.
Okay. Now, NBN's caretaker advice indicated that doing a rollout of 25 by 2016 and 50 meg by 2019, so call it a 2-truck. Their advice stated that it would be a waste of money to do the 2 rollouts, and it said NBN recommends that vectoring technology is deployed initially so that VDSL2 network is rolled out in a single rollout for the following reasons. A 2-stage rollout implies 2 truck rolls, firstly to increase minimum download speeds to 25 meg by 2016 and then to 50 megs by 2019 for 90% of the fixed line footprint. This will increase network rollout costs, which I don't think it's possible to argue. Mm-hmm. Can you take the committee through the extra costs in doing the rollout in 2 stages rather than 1?
We're not doing the rollout in 2 stages, Senator.
So it was more cost effective to do the FTTN rollout in 1 stage?
Yes.
1 set of truck rolls rather than 2?
Yep.
That would make sense.
Yep.
Would it cost more to do 2 truck rollouts?
Yes, I would have thought so.
Mr Adcock, you're the construction expert.
Yes, it would cost more to do 2 truck rolls.
And it would be a very inefficient use of NBN's resources.
Would be.
It would be,
yeah. Okay, thanks.
But that's, to be clear, that's not what we're planning.
Yeah, no. You're planning to do 1. No. I'm agreeing with you entirely, and it agrees with the NBN's caretaker advice, which says it would cost a lot more, and you're agreeing it would cost a lot more to do 2, but you've made the decision to save money for taxpayers by doing it once.
And just to support Mr Adcock earlier, we are very, very focused on costs, trust me, very focused, as all my colleagues are.
Yeah. No.
Not just me.
I've got no argument with that decision whatsoever. It's the sensible decision. Now, I think Senator Urquhart had some questions.
Actually, before you go to Senator Urquhart, Senator Conroy, Senator Urquhart, could maybe get an indication of whether
Look, I think I'll be close to finished.
I'm just wondering whether to let the next witnesses know if we like to be bringing NBN back after lunch. We're going to lunch at 12:45. So is 35 minutes going to see you finished, or would you prefer us to advise the other witnesses that we're going to be late?
Look, I mean, I've got a million questions, but I'm conscious that we have another committee hearing of a different committee coming up, so I don't want to spend all of the time taking up your time.
No, look, I don't think we've got any more. So if you can do it in 35 minutes.
I can do mine in 35 minutes, but if you've got any
No,
more...
I've still got some questions.
Yep.
So you think we'd
But
like
I'm
to
happy
come
to
back?
let Senator Urquhart have a go.
No, the question was, do you think...
Look, I would hope to be...
Okay, all right, we'll give it a go. Okay, Senator Urquhart.
Thank you. Mr Adcock, I just want to talk about the rollout statistics specifically for Tassie. So according to the NBN Co's weekly rollout statistics for the week ending the 4th of May, the NBN, Tasmania's NBN passed 38,338 premises. 6 months later, so that's for the week ending 6th of November, the number of premises passed was 38,345. So can you just tell me if I'm actually reading that right? Because it looks to me like that footprint's only increased by 7 premises in 6 months, according to that information.
Senator Urquhart, thank you for the question. I believe the senators and myself have had this discussion many times. The numbers as you're reporting them are correct as they're reported. The method for reporting those changed as you know when we decided, well, when the decision was taken to report premises passed.
No, passed.
No, passed.
This is passed, yes.
Senator, you remember the difference between passed and serviceable. So I can say for Tasmania, the premises passed, as I think the number you quoted was 38,338, is that right? In May?
That was in May,
Yes.
38,338.
Yep.
And then 6 months later, for the week ending 6th of November...
It is 54,873.
But not passed to the definition that you currently tout as passed.
No. Past the current definition is those that...
And you've been quite derogatory, not you, but others have been quite derogatory about the definition of past, not really representing anything, but you're drawing on it to defend your rollout progress in Tasmania.
No, we have quite openly stated, Senator, that...
I didn't say you. I said others have been quite derogatory about using the past when it's not really connected. But now you're using it as your defence.
No, I'm trying to make sure that the numbers that are being quoted on a like-for-like basis. I'm not saying that premises passed isn't a very valid construction metric. I utilise it internally. But by putting it on websites and giving, a potential view that you're able to be connected because we've come past was the reason we took it down. And so when people look at the website now and see, I believe the number is 38,345, is that it?
Yep.
That is the number that was previously sort of ruled off, but then we're only putting new numbers on when they're ready for service and an end user can call up and get connected. And Senator Urquhart, I'm not hiding from the fact that we've had all sorts of trouble connecting premises in Tasmania.
So what's been happening?
It's a year since you took over.
They've been absolutely, and I'm happy to say that they've now passed 54,000 premises from a construction perspective. I think I'm very open on the record of saying we've now got a clean-up program going around and addressing the previous sort of premises passed where there was perhaps a multi-port in the street, perhaps not, and bringing all the FSAMs and all the areas up to a particular standard that will allow the end user connection experience to be a lot better. In fact, in Tasmania, I'm happy to say that of the 20 FSAMs that are under the disconnection regime, 10 of them have now cleared the hurdle required in the clean-up campaign, and the other 10 are scheduled to be finished by the end of the year. So we're confident that all 20 will be at a service class where customers can get connected before the disconnection date.
So how many contract instructions for build have been issued since May in Tasmania?
How many contract instructions for build? Since May.
Yep.
I will revert on that. I can do the premises calculation, but the actual contract instructions...
So what's the premises then?
I will come back to you with the contract instructions.
Okay. And FZAMs? What are the...
That's
FSAMs, sorry.
That's all right.
What are they?
So we would normally issue one contract instruction per FSAM, and within that, depending on the population density of the area, there is on average 2,000 to 2,500. I think Senator Conroy is the unit of measure.
Okay. So just so that I've got this in my head, so the documentation that I was looking at from the 6th of November said that there were 38,345 premises passed, but you're saying 54,000. So just explain to me what the difference is. Is it just since the 6th of November that you've been working extraordinarily hard, or have you changed the way in which it's measured? We've changed
the measure that is published, and that is captured in a footnote on the publication. Yep. So, again, I'm more than happy to explain why and what the difference is. So, if in May, as I said, I think you said the number was around 34,000. No, in May it was 38,338, and that was under a we released. We said premises were passed as soon as the construction team rolled past. What we then changed to was saying that we're only declare them on our website as premises passed if they were ready for service and an RSP could sell services to a customer. In the meantime, we continued to build and pass premises and put in place clean-up programs to make sure that when they were declared ready for service, you had you were constructed to a point where the installation would be a much better experience for the end user. I know we've had all sorts of issues in Tasmania. I'm sure you've had your constituents calling you about the installation experience. So the comparative measure from May, and I believe we changed the way we reported on the... No. We changed the 30th of April.
Your weekly rollout update.
Yeah, it was the 30th of April, wasn't it, Senator?
I think about that.
Yep. So that's why May would be predominantly the old measure. We've continued to construct network, but we just haven't declared them ready for service yet because we've had issues with getting the lead-in. And as you well know, we've had issues with workforce in Tasmania and getting to a stable base where, we could lift our rate of doing lead-in work and install work for end users.
So, what Mr Adcock's saying, from a comparative perspective, the two numbers you want to compare are 38,338 versus 54,545, using the same measure. But because we've changed the measure to include a serviceable, a better customer experience, that's why you've seen that less. Yeah.
So why don't you... Okay, so you're not updating the weekly stats with the old metric.
Because we're not releasing those properties because we don't want end users to call their RSP, order a service, and then find it takes them 3 or 4 months to get a connection.
Yeah, so it's entirely a cosmetic thing.
Correct. Well, it's not cosmetic; it's a real customer experience issue. We've made a commercial decision not to label something ready to be sold when it can't be probably sold in service.
No, there's difference. No, let's be very clear. There's leave it to us to fight this one, Mr. Rue. It's a bad one to buy into.
This is anti-cosmetic.
This is about and where you deliberately conflate a decision the company took originally, which, as Mr. Adcock and I have chuckled about. You just passed the gate, and then a service could be ordered, and people came back. So call it a. I want to make sure I get it the right way around, Mr. Adcock. But a build drop's what you're doing now. So
a build and bulk drop, we're following it through. Whereas
but
it used to be a demand drop
model.
Demand drop.
There's a difference between a demand drop model where you didn't connect to the home, but you could order a service, and then they would come and do the lead-in to the home. But there's also a subset of that where not all of the actual work was done in the pits. And I think Mr. Adcock's correctly described them previously, where that might be more appropriately referred to as the clean-up phase, rather than implying that every home fell into that category, which
Yeah,
some in the media have done, but you've been quite correct in not implying that that was the case.
No. And the problem was somewhat amplified in Tasmania because there was, as you know, in the early days, a high aerial component. And, you know, we had instances where it was classed as premises passed. An end user would ring up and order a service because, quite rightly, they went to their website. It said, you can order a service. An order was placed, and a technician would turn up and find that he had, you know, 120 metres of an aerial drop to do, requiring 2 cherry pickers, a number of poles, and there was no consistency of work. So what we've tried to do is, you know, remove that variation from the equation, go around and get everything to a state where you know, where when an end user can ring up and order a service in confidence. So, you know, but as an internal construction metric, as the Senator said, we're still building, we're still constructing. The 38 compares to the 54, so there has been work going on. There's been a shake-up within a number of the contractors there to get refocused on getting the premises serviceable. We continue to issue contract instructions. Our current number of premises that we've got contract instructions out there for is close to 85,000. And so, you know, the notion that things have come to a halt, Senator, I think is unfair.
Well, I don't think I said that. I was asking.
A growth of 6.
Can I just ask, what's your expected FTTP proportion of the 200,000 that you originally contracted for? So, I think you've now indicated publicly, and I'm hoping that this can be clarified. It's been described in the media as the default position is FTTN now. If you're not at some point through the construction process, and I'll ask about that.
Unless you're in a HFC area.
Yeah. Sorry?
Unless you're in a HFC area.
Yeah, don't worry, Tasmania's not on an HFC area.
Sorry, you're talking about Tasmania, I'm sorry.
No HFC in Tassie.
Yeah.
So in Tasmania, you have an existing deployment of FTTP.
Correct.
What percentage of Tasmania will be completed FTTP versus not completed FTTN, given there's no HFC option?
Okay. So we're still finalising that, Senator. As you know, there's the planning rules came out last week.
But the default, I mean, Mr. Roos indicating the default position now outside of HFC is FTTN. So
that's right.
You know exactly how many homes you've already contracted.
80, close to 85,000.
85,000 homes are contracted.
Yep.
But within a small margin, depending on those rules, the remaining 115,000, which were originally contracted for FTTP, will only get FTTN. Is that what we should assume within a margin of? I accept there might be a little bit of movement due to some of those design rules, but essentially, of the original 200,000 contracted FTTP, only 85,000 within a small margin.
Subject to some planning.
Yeah, no, I accept that, but it's not going to be 50,000 suddenly are on FTTP as part of the design rules. So
that would be correct.
Let's not kid each other.
No, you're right, it's not.
So it's about 85,000 in Tas will have FTTP, and the roughly 115,000 remaining that haven't had a construction notice issued will get FTTN.
I wouldn't say that. I'd say that 85,000 is where we have contract instructions issues. The majority of the balance will be the technologies deployed under the multi-technology mix. I'm happy to take it on notice and come back.
I'm sorry, I'm unsure why you're suddenly qualifying it. You've indicated
because there were certain parameters, as we said in the announcement, whereby if there is well advanced, there would be a decision to be made.
I'm trying to understand. Okay, so I wasn't trying to trap you on the 85,000. Okay, so let me be clear. When I say 85,000, I'm assuming they're confirmed FTTP, or are you indicating that not all of those 85,000 are at that threshold that you indicated in your press release last week?
We have those are the premises that have a contract instruction issued. They'll be built.
They'll be
It is
built.
our
Okay.
belief at this point in
All
time.
right, no,
they'll be
okay,
built.
thank you. But there are some others that are in design phase. Is that what you're indicating?
That
And
haven't
you're
had a
not sure-
contract instruction issued, and we're not sure.
And you're not
some
sure.
of those could
Okay.
continue.
No, thank you.
Some
Okay.
couldn't.
How many are in that category?
Right.
Is it 5,000, 10,000?
I will take that on notice and come back to you.
Surely there is somebody who can easily tell you this. I mean, this is what you do, you know, according to your work schedule. This is 24/7 for you, Sundays included, Mr. Adcock.
Yes, you.
I mean, you should know.
You're appraised of my work practices. There's a whole lot of planning going on at the moment in design, Senator, and there, you know, when we looked at...
But you've issued design documents. How many design documents have you issued which haven't led yet to construction instructions?
Again, without going into
In Tasmania. I'm talking specifically Tas.
Again, without going into the details of the contracts, as you know, originally the Tier 1 contractors were doing the design. We've taken the design for Tasmania back in-house. We don't issue design instructions to the contractor anymore. We do the design in-house.
All right, so it's in-house. How many have you worked up?
I'll take it on notice. I don't have the answer here in front of me, Senator.
So 85,000 locked in, and I'm not trying to be pejorative, just saying, I think you were very emphatic before that 85,000 will be built FTTP. There's some subsection, you'll take on notice, you're not sure yet, of the remaining 115,000 that were originally contracted, and I'm happy for that number to fluctuate a little bit, that you're in the process of design that could still be FTTP.
Correct.
But then after that number, everything is FTTN by default.
In the fixed line footprint.
In the fixed line, yes. Where there's no HFC, which Tassie has no HFC.
Yep.
So could you just explain to me what you're defining in that announcement last week as, I'm trying to remember your phrase that you used in the press release, at some stage of advanced construction. What does advanced construction mean for the purposes of that press release?
Again, Senator, it's how far we are down the track. What's the cost benefit of continuing or changing?
Okay, no, I appreciate.
So there is no dictionary.
I know, that's why I'm asking about it. I can't look that one up anywhere. And
we're looking at every FCM on a case by case basis.
Can I assume that everybody now, there is a little bit of green on the map, that there's now FTTN green in some areas where you've already announced your trials?
Oh, the trials.
Okay, so when I say this, please discount those ones.
Right.
For everybody that's on your map at the moment that's got the green, so I'm assuming brown, not even a question, they're actually well down the construction phase. The green that's on your NBN co-maps at the moment, putting aside your FTTN green, okay, because by definition they won't be FTTP. So that's just the colour that you put them up on your NBN map. Yeah. Okay, so if you're green on the map today, FTTN aside,
yes,
you'll get FTTP under these advanced construction definitions. So I'm just assuming that if you've made the green on your NBN co map, that's meant you're in the advanced construction phase. Now you could say yes, that's correct, but there's still some areas that we haven't yet put up as green, which may still get there.
Senator, I just want to be clear that just because an area is green, excluding the FTTN trials, does not necessarily mean you'll get FTTP.
Okay, so even though you've listed it as under what's your phrase for green?
So the phase for green is build preparation. The trigger for build preparation in the fibre to the premise footprint is when a commencement notice is issued to Telstra. If a commencement notice is issued to Telstra and Telstra hasn't commenced yet, it would have gone green because that's the trigger. But there are a number of those that we are reviewing at the moment. Okay. Given the
thank you. That's exactly why I wanted to ask the question, because I wanted to be able to say people can look at the map, and if you can see green and you live in the green on the map, you will get FTTP. But you're now saying no.
Don't say that.
The definition of advanced construction doesn't include everything that is at the moment indicated on your maps as build preparation. So you can't make the assumption. That's really just what I wanted to get to. And that's what we're trying to, particularly for Tassie, we're trying to understand that. But in Tassie, the 85,000 that you've indicated are they're locked in.
Their contract...
But being green on the map does not mean you're locked in FTTP.
Does not mean...
Right.
Yeah, the 85,000 that I noted there, a contract instruction issued, they would be brown.
Okay. So, for the purposes of both Tasmania and the rest of the country, Mr. Simmons is obviously just looking at the looking at the maps, and fair enough. I'm a regular visitor, but the green doesn't mean, even though it's called build preparation, that doesn't meet your advanced construction definition from last week.
No.
Great. Now, thank you. That was because my natural assumption was, okay, if you're green on the map, you're probably that's locked in. But I just wanted to confirm that for people.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. I understand that the member for Braddon, Brett Whiteley, met with senior advisors in Minister Turnbull's office on Friday of last week, and that came out of a forum that was held with the Minister Turnbull in Devonport last Monday. Was anyone from NBN involved in those discussions?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
No one dragged into stunts for cameras. Good decision.
Was NBN asked to provide any information on those discussions?
No.
You weren't? Okay. Right. So.
Not to my knowledge, anyway, Sandra.
Sorry?
Not to my knowledge. No.
Not to my knowledge.
No.
And obviously, if your knowledge is broadened over the next little while, you'll let us know.
Yes.
Thank you. Were you asked to provide any information or updates regarding the North West Tasmania rollout over the past week?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And I think you've given us... my next question was going to be around the update on the North West Tasmania rollout, but I think I've collected what I need over that last bit of questioning. Thanks.
Now, some of this is a little overlapping. On 11th of November, the Burnie Advocate reported the Minister saying that NBN Co was set to release its 3-year plan early next year. Familiar with that statement?
Sorry, Senator, I was just closing out the
On the 11th of November 2014, a few days ago, the Burnie Advocate reported the Minister saying that NBN Co was set to release its 3-year plan early next year. You're familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with that.
No, Senator, I'm not familiar.
And Mr Turnbull is quoted as saying, our expectation is every Australian will know what the next 3 years will hold. I can give you a copy of the article if you'd... Turnbull Shores Coast on NBN.
Yep.
I can happily table that for you to have a look at. I'm sure Ms Carina notices it. I'm sorry, Ms Chrysler noticed it, but I'm happy to table that, Chair. Can we get some clarity here? When will NBN Co be releasing its rollout plan and what period will it cover?
In the next few weeks, Senator, anticipate providing more, as I said in my opening statement actually, we intend to provide more information to the community and also importantly to our retail service providers as to indicative rollouts.
Okay, and what period will that cover?
Senator, we're still working through that.
Well, Mr Turnbull said it'll be a 3-year plan.
Well, I'm sorry, as I said, I'm not familiar with Mr Turnbull's statement, but we're still working through that.
So you're not committing to meet Mr Turnbull's public statement?
We are committing to provide as much clarity to the community that we can and as much clarity to our retail service providers that we can.
Okay, in the Australian yesterday, Mr Jury said the NBN will shortly release its 18-month rollout plan, which will detail when and where it will land over the period. Familiar with that article?
No, Senator, I'm not.
Got to get
I don't read the
that
Australian
comms section of yours working. So, will you be releasing an 18-month plan?
Well, as I said, Senator, we're still working through that.
So, Minister Turnbull says 3 years. Mr Jury, a very credible, known recipient of NBN Co leaks, and he's indicating it's come from NBN Co. Mr Scholl's in the room. You might want to ask Mr Scholl, has he been chatting with Mr Jury? Or is Mr Ellis just working full-time on your behalf? So, what will be in your plan you'll be releasing?
As I said, Senator, we're working through the degree of clarity that we can provide the community and our retail service providers, and we will be releasing what we can very soon. It's not ready yet.
Now, I'd be very frustrated if you release it the day after the next Senate committee hearing, because that would just mean we'd call you back. So can I encourage you not to be cute, because it'll just mean we call you back to have a discussion about it, which will annoy you guys more than
Senator, there is,
Question?
sorry, Senator, the timing of it will be at a time when we are ready. As I said, we have a desire to update the community and update our customers, and when we can, we will.
Okay, so Mr Turnbull could be right when he said you'll release a 3-year plan early next year?
He could well be. We're still working through it, Senator.
Okay. And Mr Jury could be right. It could be an 18-month plan shortly.
Senator, I haven't seen either article. I'm sorry.
So will this rollout include timeframes when Australians will be able to connect to the NBN?
Mr. Thom, yes, I think it would. Yes, it would.
Will it include access technology?
Yes.
Will it resemble NBN Co's previous 3-year rollout plans, which listed individual suburbs and premise counts?
Mr. Simon.
Suburbs, but FSAM's premise count. With the equivalent of an FSAM type premise count.
Now, Mr Morrow mentioned at the last Senate Select Committee hearing in late September that NBN Co's objective was only to release a plan 12 months out. He said, so it is our intent to be able to say over the course of the next 6 months, here are the homes that will actually have service available for them to start. Over the course of the next 12 months, here are the homes. The objective is to go with 12. So I'm very confused. You've got Mr Morrow saying 12 months, Mr Turnbull saying 3 years, and Mr Jury quoting sources from NBN Go saying 18 months. You've got to be able to help me out here. What's changed since Mr Morrow told this committee that it would be 12 months?
Senator, as I have said now on several occasions, we are very conscious of the need to inform the community as best we can and our retail service providers, and the degree of information that we can provide, we will provide.
Let me quote you the Jury article. NBN executives led by Chief Financial Officer Stephen Rell are due to front estimates this week. National broadband network rollout is stepping up, with the carrier starting construction on fibre rollouts to its 1 millionth premise this week, as opposed to the official figure for homes passed of 431,000. So there you are again, Mr Adcock, boasting about your 1 millionth premise rollout to its 1 millionth premise. So you seem very proud of the 1 millionth premise figure. You've leaked it, not you personally, but Mr Scholl's in the room. Could be Mr Ellis. As I said, he works full-time on it. So are you starting your 1 millionth premise this week? Is Mr Jury accurate?
Oh, sorry, I was reading Mr Jury's article here.
It's the first para. With the carrier starting construction on fibre rollouts to its 1 millionth premise this week.
Sorry, that would be the construction. Yeah, I believe that's right. Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Good grief. As opposed to your official figure for homes passed of 431,000.
Well, there's a difference between starting construction.
Yeah, no, he says. He goes on to explain it.
Yeah.
I'm not being critical of you, Mr Adcock. I'm just noting that you're boasting about it, the company.
I'm personally not boasting, Senator.
No, I said the company. I said the company are boasting about it. Homes are passed when they are ready to be plugged in, the point being that the fibre rollout is picking up just as predicted by former boss Mike Quigley, but it will really take off next year when the deals are done with Optus and Telstra. Cable homes will be quickly annexed into the service, and NBN Co will shortly release its 18-month rollout plan. Now, he does seem particularly well informed. Now, Mr Scholl is doing his job. But I'm just shocked to find that you're not quite as well informed as your own leaks to the media.
I don't understand that.
I'm just saying, you said that you can't confirm there's going to be an 18-month rollout plan released. Mr Morrow said it will be 12 months, so I'm trying to understand who's running the company, Mr Morrow? You guys? Mr Jury? Mr Ellis?
I think the officers at the table have gone as far as they can. They've indicated that there'll be information provided in the future, but they can't really speak to that until that occurs.
What's changed from Mr Morrow? You're no longer willing to confirm Mr Morrow's 12 months. I'm now quoting your chief executive to this committee. What's changed? Will it be 12 months or not?
Senator, I've answered that question on several occasions. We will give as much information as we are able to do that doesn't mislead the community and assists our retail service providers.
This is just from September this year. This is a couple of months ago. The objective is to go with 12, but you're not prepared to confirm whether it's only be 6 or it'll be 18, but you're not confirming your Chief Executive's statement to this committee.
It certainly wouldn't be less than 12, Senator.
So it won't be less than 12?
It won't be less than 12. No.
Could it be 18?
Senator, we are working through exactly...
Is Mr Jury misinformed?
I have...
I've
answered this question on several occasions.
Senator Conroy.
I'm almost finished. I'm trying to move along.
Yeah, well, you seem to be stuck in a groove at the moment. Can we
No, I
flip
appreciate your nudging. I appreciate your nudging. So, in NBN Co's answer to a question on notice, number 291 from Budget Estimates, NBN Co is asked, and I quote, when these plans are provided to access seekers, will they be provided to the public consistent with previous practice? NBN Co answered, and I quote, no, these plans are intended for and provided to access seekers. NBN Co's website provides public information about the progress of the NBN's rollout via interactive maps. Will there be any difference between the rollout information provided to access seekers and that provided to the public? That's what you said in an answer, so I'm again just confused about what it is you're going to be providing, but I'll move on. I'd like to talk about the first 140 suburbs in New South Wales and Queensland NBN Co announced in October as part of the FTTN rollout. I take it these homes are part of the 1,000-node trial NBN Co commenced in June?
Yes, it is, Senator. Yes.
These areas are now appearing as build commenced on NBN Co's maps, but as with all other areas under construction on the NBN Co map, no time frame is set for completion. When will services become available in these areas?
Mr. Simon. Yeah. So, Senator, the maps obviously update as they get through different milestones, but clearly the first part is to have the construction program completed. We would expect that all things going on track, that construction program would be completed towards the middle of the year, so we're probably talking end of June, and then those 240,000 premises will be eligible then to be put into the release program as we deploy our products on our FTTN and FTTP products.
So, is there a date?
We'll work that through as we go through the commercial deployment of our FTTN product.
Yeah, because NBN Co's product roadmap sets out that NBN Co intends to release its FTTN product set in quarter 3 2015 now.
Correct.
So I take it you'll need this product set before the RSPs can offer services to Australians in these areas.
Correct. So you do the construction gets completed June, July. We release our products in that same quarter, July quarter, and you'll be able to turn on those premises ready for service. Okay,
so you'll be pleased to know by definition I have no knowledge or understanding of build preparation phase for FTTN and how different it is to the build prep for FTTP. So with FTTP, to reach build prep, you're issuing a Telstra commencement notice, correct?
Correct.
So what's the corresponding milestone with FTTN?
The corresponding milestone we currently plan to be when a field inspection report is delivered to the relevant party. The rationale being, Senator, that when we were originally just doing the contract instructions, we had people calling saying, hang on, I'm seeing people in my street doing NBN work.
I did explain to you that would be a problem.
Absolutely.
When you were pretending, or the Minister was pretending that it wasn't actually under construction in people's streets when you could see people constructing in his streets.
And so taking on that feedback, we said, well, you know, if people in the streets, that's a fair call. So the first step in the FTTN program is the field inspection report. Okay. So at this point in time, we believe, although that is the proposal that becomes the trigger. On the existing ones, because of the I suppose the publicity surrounding the geographies that people were advised, we put them all up as build preparation because we're blanket going out and doing the field inspection reports anyway.
So I'm trying to understand, is the network fully designed before it goes into build prep for FTTN?
Is it fully designed? No.
Has the FTTN network been fully designed before it goes into build prep? So I'm just trying to...
No, again, I always get trapped, but I don't want to get caught on what does fully designed mean. There is a design. The whole idea of the field inspection is to go out, have a look at the design, prove it in or disprove it. And so, but there are people in the field. That area has been I suppose, planned and modelled for FTTN. They're now out there proving in the design or not and modifying it. So is it fully designed? No. Is it scheduled to go ahead with FTTN pending the outcome of the field inspection report? Yes.
Senator Conroy, can I just...
I've got I'll be finished in 3 seconds and I leave and you're
beautiful.
all good.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Field inspection report for the FTTN is construction commenced, that's what you're saying?
No, that's build preparation.
Physical design? Again, I'm just... Because we're working off phrases from a different technology deployment and I'm just trying to make sure we don't end up having a waste of time of everybody's by talking about different things in the future. So I'm just trying to pin down what your metrics are, what your measures are and what we can hold you to account for.
That's okay. As we said in the fibre of the premise area, when things are in their early, and I think I've used the word preliminary design, especially in this sort of current time frame, technology may even change. So the trigger for putting fibre to the premise in build preparation was the commencement notice. In fibre to the node, we believe that the preliminary design, again, is something where we may change technology. We may find that there is a better alternative. And so at the point in time of a field inspection report, we've done our desktop design, we've done our preliminary design, the decision's pretty well made that it will be fibre to the node. We go out and do a field inspection report to proving the design. It's as good as build preparation.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, what's the value of the FTTN build contract with Telstra?
Sorry, what's the value of the FTTN?
What's the value of the FTTN build contract with Telstra?
For the 1,000 nodes?
Yeah.
I won't estimate. I'll take it on notice and come back. Yeah.
No, because I've asked you about that before and you refused to tell me last time.
It's not a refusal. I'd
Mr.
rather
Morrow made it clear you weren't going to reveal the value of any contracts, so I'm just trying to establish whether that's still the case.
Yeah, let me come back. Let me take it on
Mr.
notice.
Can we take that on notice, Senator?
Can you give me the value of any contracts? Is the NBN Co's position that you still refuse to reveal any contract values to the NBN, to the committee?
You're referring to the website, Senator?
No, the construction. I would like to know what the value of your FTTN contract with Telstra is. I would like to know, or the committee, on behalf of the committee, I'd like to know what the value of your current FTTP contracts are with your new contractors. And last time this discussion came up, NBN Co said you weren't going to reveal any of that information to the committee. Is that still the position?
Yeah, Senator, I think what we said was that we were conscious of our commercial responsibilities to our constructors, and not just our constructors, to our suppliers generally. And we do not want to provide information that confuses people, and we don't want to provide information that also is to the detriment of NBN on behalf of the taxpayer.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, because I'm going to ask for a private meeting of the committee now to discuss pressing that issue, because you don't. The definitions you've described as why you don't want to provide it aren't satisfactory. So I'd like to have a private meeting of the committee.
But can I
I'm asking for a private meeting of the committee.
Sure, but I'm allowed to speak, and I will, Senator Conroy. It is open to officers at the table to seek to refer questions to more senior officers and to take it on notice, and that's what Mr Rue has done in relation to this matter, indicating that NBN Co wants to ensure that they're being responsible in relation to issues of commerciality that could be to the detriment of
NBN Co
NBN Co.
revealed the cost of every single construction contract under the previous government. You yourself would know that saying we're not going to tell you the value of a contract can't fly.
Well, Mr Rue has indicated that he'll take it on notice.
No,
he has not refused. He's taken it on notice, and as he's taken it on notice, that is at this point in time the end of the matter. It's been taken on notice.
The process is I'm entitled to ask for a private committee meeting to discuss it.
You can ask for a private committee meeting. However, the minister has indicated
it has been taken. There is no refusal. It has been taken on notice.
Mr Morrow refused at the last hearing. not of this committee.
This is not the last hearing. This is this hearing, and Mr. Roux has said he will take it on notice.
Okay.
Senator,
I'm happy to finish there, but I'd like a private meeting to discuss.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much. Given that there are no further questions for other members of NBN. Oh, sorry, Mr. Aycock, you wish to say something?
I was just going to try and close out an earlier matter. First of all, I've had an email through the number of FSAMs that have been had a contract instruction issued since May is 7, covering 17,800 premises there or thereabouts. And finally, are you about to close? Sorry.
Oh, well, I was intending to close.
Okay, no, I just we had given an undertaking to the committee to provide the post-implementation review trials in Milton, so I'm happy to table that for the committee.
And could I just clarify, so the minister's aware, because he won't have seen this, this is a question on notice number 46, where a list of contracts is detailed with the following underneath it. Details of the estimated value for each of these contracts is commercial and confidence information that, if released, could be misapplied in the market, and this may cause harm to NBN Co's commercial arrangements. So they're actually stating, not taking on notice. This is a question on notice answer where they refuse, and there's lengthy contracts here where they refuse to supply information of basic taxpayer expenditure, and they've already refused to do it. So it's not a take on notice issue.
Well,
I'm
not indicating what.
This is what they've already done.
I'm not indicating what the reply may be to the question being taken on notice. I'm just saying that the question has been taken on notice, which is an avenue open to Mr. Roux, and that's an avenue that he has taken.
Senator Conroy, if you wish to pursue this matter, you're happy to do it in a private session.
Yeah.
Thank you very much to the officers from NBN.
No, sorry, they can't go until after we've determined the answer.
Well, then we'll determine the answer.
No, we can resolve it in 5 minutes.
Senator, can we just get this clear?
The question has been taken on notice.
The question has been taken on notice.
There is nothing to press at this point in time because the question has been taken on notice.
There's pages of answers where
Yes, but
they
that's
have...
not.
But
that's not what you're dealing with.
That is an answer to a question on notice. That is not what is before the committee at this point in time. The question has been taken.
So we can advance it and get it resolved, and we can all go.
The question has been taken on notice, so it's not possible.
It's a Silcar contract. Just so
I am indicating the question has been taken on notice.
There's a Silcar contract in Queensland, New South Wales and ACT, WP1, passive, LNDN and CC. Mr. Roux, as per your answer, where you state details of the estimated value for each of the contracts as commercial and confidence information that, if released, could be misapplied in the market, and this may cause harm. So this is your answer on the public record today. Okay. Do you still refuse to provide us with this information based on your answer?
Sorry, Senator. As I said earlier, we're conscious of your requests in this area, and we need to consider the commercial and confidence issues. And
you have, and you said you won't answer.
And we need, and we need to make sure that we protect the interests of the taxpayers. And that is our focus, Senator.
No, but that's not
taxpayer
taking
we're concerned.
you're not taking on notice what you've already said to me, surely.
No, Senator Conroy, you have...
These are your answers. They'll be in front of you in a moment.
Senator Conroy, you are clearly asking for the question which is on notice. You are clearly asking for NBN Co
to confirm,
to examine the response to the question on notice and to see if they can provide any additional information. So, in light of that, Mr. Roux has said that he will take that on notice to the extent that NBN Co can be responsible.
That's exactly what he just said, Senator.
Not exactly what he just said.
It is to the extent that NBN Co wants to make sure that they're responsible to the commercial interests of the organisation, to the taxpayer interests, and so they've acknowledged that you are seeking additional information, and they are taking that on notice.
Senator, the fact of the matter is that they have said they will take on notice the question that you have just asked.
If you wish, Mr. Roux did not use those words.
Mr. Roux, do you wish to take on notice?
Senator,
no. Mr. Roux used words to that effect.
No, I've just asked a very specific one-line question about Silcar's contract in Queensland, WP1, passive LN, and said, do you stand by your answer you gave on notice, which is details of the estimated value for each of the contracts, is commercial in confidence information that, if released, could be misapplied in the market, and this may cause harm to NBN Co's commercial contracts. That's the basis. You will not give us the value of that contract. Do you need to take on notice to confirm what you've already taken on notice and given us a reply on?
Two parts to that. One is, yes, I stand by anything that I have put in the public record as on notice, as an answer to a question.
So why do you need to take on notice the same question?
Secondly, as I've said now on several occasions, we are working through the commercial in confidence issues, taking into account the need to protect the Australian taxpayers.
You've had 3 months. What extra time do you need?
Senator, that's what I'm taking on notice.
Mr. Rue, we have a point of order before
Can we have a private meeting?
I think a lot of questioning now is getting to a repetitive stage and
can we have a private meeting?
Pestering the witness. So I think that the question has been asked multiple times and their witnesses have given their answers.
Well, can I have a private meeting?
Well, that's up to the chair, sorry, not to me.
I'm asking for a private meeting, Chair. You said we'd have one?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your comment. There's no specific point of order, but Senator Conroy, the witnesses have stated the grounds on which they have chosen to deal with the question. So,
well, I may have a question for them.
So
the trick here is, can we have a private meeting and take 5 minutes before you release them? Because I'd like to release them, but I'd like to have a discussion first.
Well, we'll suspend for 2 minutes. We'll have a private meeting because we'd obviously like to.
We'll go outside so you all don't have to move. It's all right.